Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It's a beautiful sunny day in Geneva, and the greatest gift you can give us is the gift of time. And you've honored us with your presence today. It's my honor and pleasure to be your host. I'm Nobuntu Ndlovu. I'm the communications lead at Giga and also the supporting partner for Safe Online today. Today's Safe Online event is titled Safe Connections, Ensuring Child Safety in a Digital Era. This is an important aspect for us at Giga because at Giga, our main priority is making sure that we're connecting all schools to the internet by 2030. And as we do that, it's our responsibility to make sure that for each and every school we connect, each and every single child we introduce to the internet, we are making sure that we are not thinking about safety as an afterthought, but rather safety is something that goes hand in hand with the work we are doing. You are present with us today, however, we are not alone. This is being streamed live, so hello to our audience online. We look forward to engaging and sharing ideas, and most importantly, learning what we should be doing to ensure that we have a safe world for our children and indeed ourselves. A quick summary of our program. We're going to have some opening remarks coming through. We have the Secretary General from ITU coming through later on in the day, 2 packed panels, and a look into the future, and then, of course, a networking reception after. To kick off our opening remarks, I would like to invite Dr. Najat Mala Majid, the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children, to come up and give us his opening remarks. I thank you.
From New York. Dear friends and partners, I am online, effectively. Greetings from New York. Dear friends and partners, there is an echo. Dear friends and partners, many thanks to the organizer for inviting me to this timely event. Connecting every school to the internet is essential to close the digital divide. But as more children connect, we must ensure they can do so safely. And I would like to share with you key 3 messages on the urgent need to ensure a safe and empowering digital environment for children. First, being online brings opportunities, but also brings serious risks. The digital environment offers many opportunities for children to realize their rights. It allows children to express their views, to access relevant information, and to education. It also allows children to access services online, such as violence reporting, psychosocial support, guidance and counseling, and peer support. Yet, while the digital environment offers many opportunities for children, it also exposes them to diverse forms of violence and harm which are spreading rapidly. Many data gaps remain regarding online violence, but the figures we have are alarming. According to WeProtect's most recent global threats assessment, there was a 7,200% increase in reports of financial sexual extortion targeting children between 2021 and 2022. According to a recent review of evidence by WHO, 11.5% of children had received unwanted online sexual solicitation. 8% of adolescents had a self-made sexual image forwarded without consent. 15% of children reported cyberbullying victimization. We have also seen how criminal networks use online means to promote self-harm, suicide, radicalization, and hate speech, to facilitate trafficking and smuggling, and to recruit children into criminal, armed, or violent extremist groups. Technology-facilitated abuse, included through AI, creates extra challenges for children, which are related to the persistence of abusive or harmful material, blackmail, re-victimization, and self-blame. Most online crimes against children go unreported. Most victims remain unidentified. Most perpetrators go unprosecuted. Only a small minority of child victims seek help or advice and have access to justice and remedies. And we know that the impact of online violence on the well-being and mental health of children is both devastating and long-lasting. Second message, proactive protection of children online cannot wait. Offenders and criminals follow closely the legislative framework and capacity clause. This means ensuring sound legislation, including criminal law that appropriately addresses all forms of online violence and crimes against children, guided by the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the Committee on the Rights of the Child General Comment 25. This means also providing adequate resources to support the effective investigation by law enforcement of online violence, especially given the complexity and transnational dimension of dealing with crime of this sort. Legislation and regulation take time to enact, while risks to children in the digital world emerge quickly and spread rapidly. Hence, the ICT industry has a special responsibility. Purely voluntary approaches are insufficient. Child safety by design, child rights due diligence and regulatory frameworks compliant with the highest standards of ethics, privacy, and safety of children are needed more than ever. Awareness raising and capacity building for children, empowerment of children and families and professionals is also key. My third message, children must be involved as part of the solution. During my consultations with hundreds of children worldwide on the theme of child protection online, they report that the digital environment is central to their life. It has given them crucial opportunities to express themselves and make their voices heard in matters that affect them. Children report also that they are turning more and more to the online world when they are experiencing violence, including through accessing helplines, counseling, and reporting services. Children are increasingly taking action to connect with and support their peers through the digital environment. All of this underscores the importance of empowering children, listening to them, and respecting their views to ensure their effective online protection and that of their peers. Dear friends and partners, the challenge of guaranteeing the rights of children online and keeping them safe is not fundamentally new. We have been talking about these problems for many years, yet efforts today have not yielded the results that are needed. They are not keeping pace with rapid change in the digital world and in children's access to it. An adequate response to the full range of risks that children face online requires more leadership, commitment, and accountability from every component of the ecosystem. Exchanges like these, where all involved stakeholders come together to identify common solutions, are needed more than ever. We must ensure that child protection and well-being are duly embedded in the evolving framework for internet governance and regulation, including with the Global Digital Compact. I look forward to today's discussion and, more importantly, the work that lies ahead in ensuring children's rights and their freedom from violence are fully guaranteed in the digital environment. Only 6 years remain to keep the promise of the 2030 agenda to end all forms of violence against children in all settings, including online. There is no time to waste. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you to Dr. Najat Mahala Majid for her opening remarks. It's quite sobering when you hear the stats that she mentioned and how, for as long as I've lived, I've always heard about us talking about child safety online, and yet we haven't really made the dent that is protecting our future societies. My key takeaway would be the legislation and the criminal law, the criminalization of everything that is taking place exposed on our children. What is it that we need to be doing? And today, these are some of the conversations we want to have. We'll now dive straight into our first panel, which is Digital Connectivity and the Well-Being of Children, led by Serena Tomasino. If you could please come up, Serena. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Novo. Let's see if we can make this work. Yes, I would like to welcome the panelists to come. So we have, and thank you for everyone to be here today. It's a pleasure. We have Emily from Thorn, we have Daniel from Innocenti, Paul from the Swiss Police, and Chiara from WHO, and Juliet. So that's great. As Nobo was saying, today we're here to talk about how children are experiencing the internet. And this first panel is actually going to look at that specifically. We're going to bring the light into the lives of children online to see, their perceptions, their experiences, how they're taking decisions, how they're taking risks if they're taking them. And this helps us to understand better, how we can make sure that they can enjoy it and be, risk-free or harm-free, most importantly. The internet and technology evolution is an amazing tool. And of course brings the world into their rooms, into their schools. They have the world in the palms of their hands with their phones. And this brings them new friends, new people, access to information, access to new skills, new language skills. I live in Tunisia, for example. I'll give you a very concrete example. It's a French-speaking country, and my generation speak Italian because they used to watch Italian TV. The new generation speaks English. They learn English on YouTube. They watch the internet. You go to villages on the border with Algeria or Libya, you find young children speaking English because of the internet connection. So that's great. It's a window into opportunities. But those opportunities and people that come into their rooms or their schools or their private lives, sometimes can also bring risk and harms. And this is what we're going to talk about in this session. We're going to learn about children from different parts of the world. We have Emily from Thorn that, Thorn, she's going to tell you more about Thorn, but they've done a lot of research with children in the US, but also work globally with industry and law enforcement. We have Juliet, she's bringing the voice of children from Nigeria. Daniel is going to tell us about a large-scale project we have funded for 50 million that is being implemented in 25 countries. Basically, 25,000 children between the age of 12 and 17 are sharing their views about what they're experiencing. And he's going to tell us a little bit about children from 13 countries in Southeast Asia and in Southern and Eastern Africa. Chiara will bring the global perspective from the mental health point of view. And then we have Paul, which is, he works in Switzerland with the police. He's going to bring us the law enforcement perspective, but also to bring it back to Europe, because this is not an issue just, in the rest of the world. It's an issue everywhere. It's an issue in Italy, in Switzerland, and so on. So without further ado, I will start from Emily. Emily, you are the Director of Policy from Thorn. And we would love to hear from you about what Thorn has learned so far across its activities. What are you seeing? What you would like us to know today? Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for having us. For those who don't know Thorn, we're a nonprofit technical organization out of the US that builds technology to find and remove child sexual abuse material from the internet. We do that with both law enforcement and industry, and then we have an extensive research team as well that kind of deep dives and does studies with youth about what they're seeing and how they're interacting online. So there's quite a few different areas I can kind of touch on here, so I'll try and be quick, and I'm conscious that, there's a timer, and I have been warned about this timer. So first, when it comes to our work with industry, one of the things we're seeing is this isn't going away. If an industry partner looks for child sexual abuse material on the internet, they find it. I have a really good example, and I will not name the company, who wasn't doing any kind of CSAM detection. So the year before, they reported roughly 40 or 50 pieces of child sexual abuse material to NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which is kind of the central reporting hub of CSAM. That's how much they found in the first week of using Thorn's tools. Because if you look for it, you will find it, and it's not going away. Next, when it comes to our research, this is where I'll kind of get into a bit of the research and a bit of our work with law enforcement. We just released a study deep diving into the data that NECMEC received on sextortion reports from the past year or so. And we found some really interesting trends there. Obviously, the crime of sextortion is not new. It's been around for a long time, whether it came from like dating violence, et cetera. But what we're seeing in particular now is financially motivated sextortion that's targeting youth, in particular 14 to 17-year-old boys, which is something we haven't necessarily seen. We haven't necessarily done a lot of the messaging towards that group. So this is a really evolving crime set for us. And one of the things that really struck out to us is a lot of the preventative messaging when it comes to sextortion and online harms and things are based towards girls. So I remember my mom was an educator, and she used to say that, you know, for a long time we thought we were leaving our girls behind when it came to kind of STEM education and things. Well, now when it comes to the online world, we're actually leaving kind of our boys behind on how we do messaging for them, because they're the ones being targeted by these organizations and these criminal rings. And it happens fast. It happens normally within 24 hours. It's very rapid. It's actually really old school techniques too. So that's the thing that kind of worries us about this financial sextortion, is right now they're kind of just using scripts. We see the same language over and over again. It's very repetitive. Imagine what they do if they start doing this at scale with things like ChatGPT and really automating it. You know, it's a really dangerous crime set. The next thing we've done is we've done longitudinal studies, in particular on US youth, but we've actually just launched this year the same study with French and German youth. We're hoping to expand it even further about what those kids are seeing and hearing online, what they're experiencing. And it's been a really interesting study for us. We're getting ready to release our 4th year of it, because it doesn't matter where the youth are based. They're seeing very similar things. They see tech in a very similar way. The biggest change we saw that was different between Europe and the US was which apps they use and things like that. But they're still seeing the same things. They're still having interactions with strangers they've never met before. And they know that a lot of times they're not youth. They know that they're oftentimes adults and things like that. So they're seeing these same things. We know that the number one way that they want to interact with a platform when they come across something harmful or a user that they're not necessarily enjoying the interaction with, is they just want to block. They just want this person to go away, because the reporting mechanisms oftentimes are very long and detailed. I don't know if anybody's ever tried to report on apps, but I mean, it's like 30 buttons and you're signing 15 things. It's a lot. It's a very strenuous process. So what we've also heard from youth in those reports is that's what they would like more of. They want more safety settings. They want to have more autonomy and be able to call out and protect their friends, protect each other. They need that education and things like that. Because this is where they have their freedom. This is where they're interacting online. We need to stop looking at how youth engage from our perspective and actually learn from them. And that's why we think this study is so important. And the final point that I'll bring up, just because I think is important here, is I just kind of mentioned what industry, law enforcement, and our study with youth. All of this data is still also very siloed, though, and that's a huge problem that I think we need to address and start talking about more regularly, because law enforcement holds a piece of this puzzle, and they've gotten good at sharing with each other across international borders. But what happens with industry? And industry, again, has started sharing amongst different industry partners. There's things like Project Lantern through the Tech Coalition, where they're sharing trends. And then all of us here, we hold a piece of the puzzle with the data and the research. But we need to now start connecting all of these pieces moving forward and really looking at the youth perspective across all of them and seeing how we can bring everything together. And I'm hoping I'm at time. Am I good?
That's great, like on the spot.
Love it. Love it. Thank you.
And also you touched on very many interesting points, like listening to children, understanding what they're experiencing, how they would like to report, how they would like to get support, instead of having an adult mindset about that. And also, seeing what governments are doing and how we can support them, or to create these safe connections, which actually is the name of the event today, also within other sectors like education. So that's very relevant to move to instead to Daniel, that is going to share the experiences from the children that have been interviewed as part of the Disrupting Harm project, currently being implemented in 25 countries across 4 regions. And to you, Daniel, please.
Thank you, Serena. Testing. Okay, very good. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. I think it's fantastic to see the safety and connectivity agenda come together. I think it's a really good moment. I was at the Giga Connectivity Forum earlier in this week, and we heard from a range of governments, mostly in low connectivity settings, who are trying to connect every school to the internet. And they're making tremendous progress towards that goal. At the same time, in well-connected countries, right now the public discourse and even some policy development is a bit concerned with how much time children actually spend online and what that might do for their well-being and their mental health. So clearly, countries globally right now, they're at very different stages of digital development, and our solutions need to reflect that. And that's why we make such an effort, including on the Disrupting Harm project, to collect national level data, to hear from children, but also other stakeholders, because otherwise there's a very real risk that our solutions will not be as effective as they could be. Having said that, at this point, we've actually collected enough data that we can aggregate it and start gleaning regional or even global insights. And today I wanted to share 2 of those with you. So the first one, based on all of this research that we've done, is that spending time online and doing lots of different activities online is one of the best ways for children to gain digital skills. We've done this research, as Serena mentioned, I think, with children in Africa, in Asia, but actually also with children in Europe. It is a remarkably consistent finding, which really makes sense if you think about it. I mean, practice makes perfect. And even activities that we think of as pure entertainment, like using social media or playing games, they do contribute to children's skills. An issue, however, that we see is that these potential benefits, they are unequally shared. The opportunities for children to build skills are not the same, depending on where they live. And so unless these gaps in connectivity and skills are closed, there's a very, very real risk that connectivity actually becomes a driver of inequity, not an equalizer of opportunity. And that's why efforts like Giga are really important, the movement towards increased connectivity, cheaper data, easier access to devices, and so on. But the second issue, which is more on the safety side, is that the internet right now, it's not as safe as we need it to be. And hence the concern that being online can harm children's mental health and well-being. And that is a very valid concern, because being online can and does expose children to all sorts of dangerous things. And that's why it's really important for those working on connecting children to the internet to also consider what they can do for their safety. What we see in our research is that what really matters for children's mental health, it doesn't seem to be so much about the time they spend online, but rather what kinds of experiences they have, what content they're exposed to. We need to be much more nuanced as a community in our understanding of what children are actually experiencing online, to figure out how to minimize the risk and maximize the benefits. And that's why I'm very happy to have the privilege to implement Disrupting Harm in partnership with Safe Online, with Interpol, ECPAT International, and 25 countries at this point, because that research does provide us with some of that nuance that we need to understand the impact that different online experiences have on children. So 2 of the key findings of that work that I want to share, and that we'll be publishing next year, is that when you compare the impact of different kinds of online harms that children experience and that we measure, online bullying and online sexual abuse are by far the most harmful for children. And children who experience any form of online sexual abuse, they're 3 to 4 times more likely to report that they self-harmed in the last year, that they've had thoughts of suicide or even engaged in suicidal behavior, and they have much, much higher levels of anxiety. So online sexual abuse, online bullying are 2 key issues that we really should focus on preventing. And that will only become more important as connectivity increases. So just like we need to make sure that children are safe in school, we also have to make sure that they're safe online. Because if children can't use the internet safely, then they will lose out on significant opportunities for their future. You can't really easily learn and play and explore if you don't feel safe, or if you are not safe. So just to conclude, I mean, we need to do more work to understand when, how, and why different online experiences actually harm children. And this will help us be much more precise with our solutions. And the more we understand about this, the easier it is for us to guide the industry, to advocate with the industry to make their platforms safer. We demand that from pretty much every other space where children spend time, so there's no reason why we wouldn't demand the same thing for online environments. Thank you.
Yes, industry and governments that we would like, to have that conversation. And I think I have to thank the speakers. They've been very good with time, But Daniel, just in very few words, tell us what you ask children when you're talking about online sexual abuse. What is it? Because we keep it a little bit vague and we want people to kind of understand what we're talking about.
It's a good point. We ask about a wide spectrum of online sexually related harms. We ask about everything from general online harassment, whether someone sends sexually suggestive messages to them, whether they are making sexualized jokes, two more specific experiences around grooming attempts. So they're being asked to talk about sex with people, pressure to share sexual images or messages. Two things that are, definitely in the realm of abuse, which is whether people have shared their naked images online, whether they've been threatened or extorted, like Emily was talking about, and just generally if people try to convince them through online means to go offline and have sex with them, for example. So it's those kinds of experiences that we're talking about.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful. And thank you, Daniel. So we're moving a little bit from the global picture, and we can now have, insights from Juliet. She's the director and founder of the Nigeria Action Against Child Sexual Abuse Initiative. You've been working for many years in Nigeria, which is a country with a very high child population, but also very high internet penetration. So please share with us today, what are you seeing, what is happening on the ground, and what organizations like yours are seeing as successes and gains, but also what are the challenges you are facing, and how we can help. What are the opportunities ahead of us?
Yeah, thank you, Serena. Just taking it from Daniel, we are all at different levels. So sharing from Nigeria is a total different level from the conversations we've been having. So starting first, it's very important to know that technology with that penetration means a lot to us. It means that we have more young people, because we talked about penetration. Most importantly, the use of phone devices is at 88%, and that means that there's so much access. And one of the questions you asked, who is accessing these devices, who are using these platforms? Mostly young people who we understand and know that live in these spaces, even when their parents own those devices. But looking at the children, this has brought a lot of value for us. Of course, more young people, especially when it comes to the economic value. We have more young people trying so much to earn on the spaces of tech platforms, apart from, of course, the education part and, of course, socializing and learning. So, of course, it does have its benefits. But on the other hand, what this has also brought with it is a lot of young people are being inappropriately exposed to, materials that they shouldn't be. So we've seen a rise in online assisted crimes against children. So we've seen that locally on one part with young people being victims locally, and of course the intersection between online and offline harms. So now you have young people who are being lured on the online space, and then it ends up to a rape situation. So looking at I'm going to look at the angle from, let's say, cyberbullying to the worst of it, which is online child sexual abuse, what you're looking at. So this is what we see. And on the other side, we still have young people who are still using these spaces, on the other way to exploit people, sometimes globally. So this is another thing. If you know about the Yahoo, this is something that is very common with Nigeria. So for us as an organization, one of the things we've really done is to preach deterrence. Apart from deterrence on committing these crimes, we've running campaigns with young people from the universities saying online child sexual abuse is a crime, because this is our situation when you talk about levels. How much knowledge do we have? This is on the children's part. On the children's part, we do not have also enough, educative spaces or enough materials to be able to educate them. Moving to the parents' part, I just said they do not have the capacity. Moving to the government is overwhelmed because this is happening at a rate that is just so fast. I mean, we're talking about legislation on streamlining child sexual abuse materials. We don't have it. Now we're talking about legislation for AI. So we and having to be in the global south and having our own challenges economically and all that, this is not really a priority. But this is something that really affects our children. So having to know the connectivity that is, happening, and knowing that this is going to be happening through schools is going to be a very big opportunity for our children. But it's really important to also put into place structures that are going to help address some of these issues we're facing. Especially, we talked about legislation. These are some of the challenges that we're having. You know how lengthy it is to make such decisions. So we're really hopeful that, as we talk about connectivity, which is really, really important for our children, we must put it hand in hand with, ensuring that we make it safe, knowing that as the most remote part of Nigeria is going to be connected to the most advanced part of the world, it's really important to put safety into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juliet. I'm very curious. What is this Yahoo you mentioned in Nigeria?
Oh, Yahoo is what you know as the romance scam. I mean, before the COVID-19, we already had support from law enforcement, because when we talk about romance scam is where people reach out to you and tell you, I'm a handsome Nigerian prince. And we have a lot of young people, like you said, we have a young population, vibrant, intelligent population, forgive me, that, facing their own challenges, and this is looking for a way out. We want to be able to tell them that this is a crime. We want to be able to build those structures, deter them, also have structures that are addressing these issues, because this is happening because there are no structures to address these issues, and it's becoming a household thing. So these are some of the things we want to do, and locally we have our own challenges. We also want these structures to be put in place to be able to address these challenges. We do have young people every now and then, like we talked about trafficking, from trafficking to sexual abuse to rape. So there's just that intersection between what is happening online and offline, and it's really important for us that we kind of have that support, let me put it in that way, to be able to address these issues.
Thank you very much, Juliet. Very useful. And you rightly mentioned the interconnection between online and offline, which is something that we have been struggling a little bit in the last 5 or 6 years. We have been trying to break this silo, this perception that is very often supported by our organizations' structures, the mandates, the division of labor, because actually in the lives of the child, this offline-online distinction does not exist. Their lives are very interconnected, and as we move forward, we want to get rid of that idea and look at it as a whole, and just continue to talk to children to understand their lives and their perceptions and how, they're experiencing the internet. And, some of the findings from Disrupting Harm actually shows that in many cases, and Daniel can tell us the exact percentage, the child already, the victim already knows the abuser. This stranger danger message that has been going on for a long time, not just on the online space, it's not confirmed by the data and evidence that we are gathering. Thank you very much, Juliet. And we move from Nigeria to Switzerland. We jump from Africa to Switzerland, and we have with us Paul, which is the deputy head of the computer crime unit of the police of Geneva. Thank you very much, Paul. You want to tell us a little bit more about your experience, how, through your work, what are you seeing, how are you working with other sectors, how are you working with the police globally or regionally, because, we know, I think Emily mentioned, this issue requires a level of coordination across borders that was not the case before. And, how are you working with other organizations, but also what are you seeing specifically in the Switzerland context? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So it's been said at the beginning of the speech. So with the evolution of the internet, what we see is that children has gained unlimited access to the world, but in the same time, the world has gained unlimited access to children. And sex offenders and predators, before the internet, they had to physically expose themselves in order to get to have access to a child. Today, with the internet, they can hide behind the anonymity of internet and service providers. So what we see with that is that there is a huge evolution and growth of CSAM distribution and production on the internet. We in our unit we monitor all the networks, all the exchanges on for example, on the peer-to-peer networks. And we see that still it's an old technology, but it's still used to share illegal images between children. Another thing we see is on forums the behavior of people with children. They are very aggressive. They don't have any boundaries about speaking about sexuality, about what they think that's underage child. They don't mind sharing intimate pictures with them, and they ask for the self-production of images. And the other thing we see is, it's been already told, it's the growth of sextortion cases when children get attacked by criminal organizations. And the problem with that is children are more influenceable. They are more easier to threaten, and the consequences of that is that many children unfortunately commit suicide because they don't see any outcome of the problems we're into. So what we try to do at the local level in law enforcement, it's one of the biggest thing we have, it's a proactive fight. So we try to proactively find the sex offenders and arrest them. For that, I think my notes. Yeah, so we do a lot of undercover work. We try to get in touch with sex offenders. Another thing is very important. It's to create our network because the internet, they don't have any boundaries. We need to work with other law enforcement agencies, but not only with law enforcement. We need to work with NGOs, with academics, with all the actors that are playing into this field. And I think one of the most important things, and it's been already mentioned, it's prevention and education. And education for ourselves first, so we need to know how the sex predators think, how the children think, what are their motives, but also prevention and education of children. And we set up a program in Geneva with the help of the Department of Education, when we go to schools on the 9th grade and teach all the children that are like 13 years old what are the risks of the internet, how to behave, how to not behave, what to do, what is extortion, sextortion, sorry, and what to do if they get into this type of situation.
Thank you so much, Paul. Very interesting. And actually, you reminded me that, having the police go into the schools is actually an interesting approach. I remember I saw it in some states in India. They have these programs where, the police goes to the school, and actually it's an opportunity also to bring together, the law enforcement side with the community, with the parents, with the children, to break the barrier. Because sometimes, the police can be scary. So it's an opportunity, a way to break those boundaries, right? It's the same in Switzerland.
Yes, exactly. And the thing is that in every law enforcement agency in the world, we are not enough to fight and to catch all the bad people. So we have to educate the children before the crime is committed. And being close to the children is very great, because they see that we are not only there to catch the bad guys, but we are our first mission, and this most important mission, is to save the children. So it is the first goal, and we have to remind them, and they're very pleased to have us in the school.
Yeah, thank you so much. You just touched on two extremely important points. One being, before it happens, once the abuse or the harm has already happened, we already failed. So not as an afterthought, but before. And also we need to be close to the children. I have a lot of parents that ask me, what can we do? Be close to your child. Obviously we need the government, the industry, everyone, the police needs to do their role, but also the parents have a role, which is, to accompany the child and try to understand and support it. So with this, I thank you so much for, we can move to Chiara, which is our last panelist, before we can open to questions. So you will have the opportunity to ask questions or make comments or suggestions or share also your experiences. And Chiara is from WHO, the team on it's mental health and child development. And, we have heard now a lot about risks, about harms, but it will also be great to hear from you a little bit more about, from the WHO perspective, what is the thinking at the moment around the well-being and how the digital spaces are affecting it or potentially putting them at higher risk of mental health issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to contribute to this, distinguished panel. And I want to disclose that, one benefit of the online space is certainly the opportunity to provide services, both promotion, prevention, and care. I won't talk about it because my colleague Ken will do it in the next panel. So with this disclosure, I will be focusing more around, what is the intersection in between well-being, mental health, and online spaces, for young people and for children. And we need to talk about nuances here, up front, because there are 4 important variables that we need to consider always when we talk about this topic. And one is age. One is the extent of exposure. The other one is the behavior in terms of, healthy habits in terms of engagement with the digital devices and social media, or, problematic behaviors. And the last one, an important one, is the context. So I will briefly talk about, what are the benefits, and the benefits can be seen from not from early ages, but even in preschools. There is some research that points to the importance to the benefits of exposure, limited exposure to some digital tools, for instance, some early reading apps or ebooks, in terms of being able to promote early reading skills. However, even keeping this consideration at the level of the cognitive development of children, we are also conscious about the potential risks. And the risk entailed, for instance, difficulties with focus attention, executive functioning, more impulsive behavior, and the potential also, to develop addictive behaviors. We need to recognize the important opportunity that online spaces provide for participation. Participation is a critical intermediate variable for well-being in young people. And this is particularly relevant to the groups that may be marginalized. We work a lot also, with neurodivergent communities of young people and young persons with developmental disabilities, and we know that for them, the opportunity of engaging more in online spaces through the opportunity of assistive devices and accommodation online is an important opportunity that needs to be recognized. However, we are conscious again about the risks, and the risks also in terms of emotional development and emotional well-being and mental health. In particular, social media is increasingly associated, reported to be associated with problematic related to anxiety symptoms, depression, self-image issues, and eating disorders. In terms of the online gaming, we can see reported higher associations in relation to overuse, as well as addiction. So this is, in a nutshell, how we can conceptualize the panorama in relation to the benefits and the potential risks. But I would like to focus a bit on the context, because it's very important, to be able to take action at the level of context to moderate or to mediate or to be able to influence, whether children benefit or are at increased risks of, in terms of the interaction with online space. When we look at the context, we have been mentioning parents. Parents, are an important mediator in terms of both coaching and modeling their behavior in relation to use of digital devices and mobile phones, as well as the potential for them to coach in terms of etiquette, in terms of behavior online, as well as setting some boundaries, limiting, and increasing awareness and skills for the young people. The school, we at WHO, we have a very strong guidelines recommendation that asks governments to integrate social emotional learning within the school for the benefits of every adolescent. And we see this as an important opportunity to integrate elements of digital citizenship as part of the broader scope of social emotional learning, to make sure that we can enhance within schools the skills and competencies of young people to be better able to have to engage in healthy behaviors in relation to their interaction with the online space. I want to mention, maybe, I just didn't mention, I don't want to omit the physical also interaction between the online space and adolescent, which is very important and partly related also to mental health in terms of sleep behaviors as well as eating behaviors, the reduced time spending in social, social life, in real life, as well as the eroded quality time with caregivers. I close this bracket, sorry, I didn't mention it before. But coming to the parents, they have a role in, to the digital citizenship is an important element to make sure that the context can mediate outcomes. Last, I want to mention that WHO has no position around measures in the broader space of protective policy measures. However, this is a learning agenda for us, and we see that there are increasingly governments, looking into the opportunity of establishing some code of practice for online services, and this is of interest. I will stop here.
Yeah, I was ready to stop you. Thank you so much, Chiara. You know, you also mentioned some very important points about, you know, being age appropriate. You know, we can't compare and approach a 5 years old with a 15 years old. So that's something that we know and that organizations are working towards. But also the role of parents. You know, we keep on thinking about, talking about the role of parents. And, you know, Giga goes into schools, it goes into communities. You know, it's a good opportunity when you engage with the communities and the schools to work with parents and accompany them. Also because, as we said before, I think one of the panelists mentioned, you know, the contexts are different. You know, the approaches needs to be nuanced and the needs will be different. We have exactly 9 minutes for questions, so we apologize, we were supposed to do a little bit more, but it would be great also to hear from the audience, you know, if you have any questions or also suggestions, also any thought from your experience so far as part of your work. I think one of the things, and I think, you know, also with the panels after, we would like you to reflect on today is like, what can I do? How can I take this, what I've been hearing about today to my work, but also to my everyday life? And, you know, what are the actors that are investing in connectivity can contribute to this, to making it safer for children? So do we have any questions or from the audience or any thoughts? You're all being shy. Denton, I think, yeah, go ahead.
So just a quick question and just a comment that Emily mentioned about the detection of the 40 to 50 in a given week of the deployment. Could you just give a little more information about the deployment technology and how it works? Not a technical description, but just how safer works so that everybody can understand.
Yeah, I'll do it really briefly. But at Thorn, we're primarily the kind of engineers and data scientists. I'm kind of the black sheep as a policy official. But we build a technological solution. It's a piece of software, basically, that any platform with an upload button can use to find and detect child sexual abuse material, both images and videos, as well as kind of grooming text-based detection as well. So that's what we built. Does that work? Great.
Thank you so much, Emily. But I think that's one of the peculiarity of the violence prevention or child protection system that we work now. You know, we need to become experts about technology tools, which before was not the case, but also bring us together. You know, we work together more closely. So there is also an opportunity there. You know, it's also policy level. Often bringing in the discourse about digital online opens doors for conversation about issues that are normally considered taboos. You know, like sexuality. Sometimes it's very hard in many contexts to discuss it, but sometimes when we talk about digital platforms, there is more willingness to discuss. Thank you very much, Denton. Anyone else? Maria?
I think maybe just to acknowledge that there is a huge divide between the language and terminology that child protection community uses and then what industry talks about or connectivity partners talk about. So at the event yesterday, when we were at the Giga Connectivity Forum, you will hear people speak about infrastructure, financing, nodes, optic cables, and then like we come and we are like, there is this emotional dent on a child, and then they're like, it's like, I think we need to also like, when we speak about these things, we need to also make sure that we are kind of bridging this language and terminology gap. So if can somebody from the panel, whoever wants to take, Emily, Daniel, tell the audience a little bit about, when we speak about CSAM, which is child sexual abuse material, which is the images and videos of children being sexually abused, why do we care about removing those from the internet? Like, why is that so important for individual, for societies, for people, for industry, for everybody? Why do we care that that is a, why has that become a huge problem, and why do we care about that? Oh, also Paul can do it, like whoever wants to give a kick at it.
Yeah, so one point from a law enforcement perspective, it's CSAM is an evidence of a crime, so this is the first thing, okay? Second point I want to maybe point out, it's to avoid re-victimization, so people who are victims of sexual abuse and they grow up and they see their images going around the internet, it's an awful thing to live with, so this would be a second part. And then maybe you want to add some.
I think you covered the two main points, but the one thing I would add to it when it comes to the re-victimization is, you know, the crime and the violence of child sexual abuse in the physical world is horrendous and horrific. But when that image is reshared over and over again, you're resharing that over and over again. So imagine the crime that is horrendous happening to you time and time again. And the reason I always say this story, because it was told to me by a survivor, is the most horrifying question you can ask a survivor of child sexual abuse is, "You look really familiar." And that's the one that has stuck with me for years at this stage. Is that's such a normal question. You think, oh, did I meet you at a conference? You know, you look like an actor or celebrity, things like that. But for the victim of child sexual abuse, for those survivors, it's the most horrifying question, because to them, it's you saw their abuse. And that's one of the reasons we need to take it down as quickly as possible.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that. And obviously, you know, we heard a lot of stories from different countries in the world sharing the same exact experience, you know, the fear that led to suicide because they were scared of someone recognizing them. So that's, Daniel, you want to
I just wanted to add one thing, because it struck me that what Chiara was saying about repeat exposure and how that matters for mental health impacts. I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about. It's potential repeat exposure to a horrifying experience. So then it's really important to get rid of it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but imagine if your photo of you naked is shared with this entire room or this entire building, how would you feel? And that's how children feel. They feel exposed, they feel a danger. I think we have a question.
Hi, Amy Rhodes. I'm Communications Program Manager at IOM. And so I've worked a lot on behavior change communications, advocacy campaigns. And I want to pick up on something that Juliet said, which was about this interaction between the online and offline interactions. And we see that over the last 15 years, that the number of children who are trafficking victims has tripled. And this coincides with much greater online engagement. And now a third of the detected victims from our research are children. And so I think that there's an important aspect to look at in terms of children who are being contacted, connecting with people online, that leads to much that leads to an interaction offline. And I think that there's also an important role here in terms of peer-to-peer communications. And this is something that we've been working on in West Africa. We've done a campaign called Migrants as Messengers, and it's basically those who have experienced this type of abuse, these types of situations, coming back to their communities, and they're really the messengers to their own peers. And I remember just anecdotally when I was in high school, so some years back, the Just Say No campaign. This was something Nancy Reagan started years ago, but that we had former drug addicts that came back and spoke to us when we were in high school, and it was so impactful. It kept me off. I stayed far away from drugs, but I think that we talk a lot about law enforcement, governments, but I think there's also a really important communications aspect of being able to share those experiences and use the testimonies of people that are willing to share about their experiences to really impact young people. And we've seen, just to say, we did a randomized control trial, and we saw that it was really impactful, this type of peer-to-peer communications.
Yes, thank you very much. Let's take the other question, and then there is another one there.
The internet was built on the concept of freedom, right? That it would be free and grow, and it's led to the exponential growth of positivity and negativity. While we think of Giga, while we think of connecting all the school, is there a thinking of not connecting them to the same internet we built, but using this new growth to something different, to a different type of internet, rethinking the root rather than trying to solve the issue it created?
Thank you. Let's take the other question, and then we can ask the panelists to answer. There, Fami, there. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Isabel De Sola. I'm here from the Tech Envoys office, and I was very happy to join you. The Giga initiative is something that we've heard a lot about since 3 or 4 years that the Tech Envoys office was created in New York. And I actually just had a comment to the comment that was made from the front row about the differences in language. Some of you may be aware about a negotiation happening in New York, the Global Digital Compact. Is that yes? So one of the, I just wanted to mention this off the record, that one of the happy places of convergence in that negotiation was around children's safety online. And while 13 pages of the document are under intense and furious negotiation, it was wonderful to see that there was a high level of support for the language in paragraphs now 30 and 31 about children's safety. And the document itself combines the connectivity language with the online economy language, with data governance, and in its last chapter with emerging technologies and AI. So for the first time, or for the second time, the UN has a unifying approach. And children's safety online was given this importance. The text is very clear about how national governments, civil society, academics need to collaborate in order to protect children from abuse. But what's very interesting is paragraph 31, where the text calls to tech companies and developers and asks them as well to do their part or to step up their part. One of the paragraphs to the tech companies talks about reporting mechanisms. It talks about also providing educational resources for their young and child users. And so I think this is something that, and the GIG initiative is of course also mentioned in the connectivity chapter. But this is a policy document that will kick off in September, and it's, I think, a very good signal, a strong signal from the multilateral ecosystem that the current status quo cannot continue for children's safety online. So thank you.
Thank you very much for mentioning the Summit of the Future in September. We will be there. And, you know, when I speak sometimes with colleagues or friends or other professionals, like, what do you do? What we do? And say, our success is also this, you know, ensuring that child online safety is in these policy global documents and so on. I'm looking at the time, and they're doing really badly. So but I think I can give 30 seconds to each panelist to address. I mean, your question is very interesting, but I think we can have a full session on that one. But, you know, a conversation to be continued. But I think I can pass the mic, be very strict. You have half a minute.
So thank you for that question. Yes, when it comes to peer-to-peer advocacy or sensitization, that really works. And we had a national consultation by the Nigerian Communications Commission, and I was on that panel. And one of the things the children let us know is that it's very convenient for them to talk with each other against talking to parents or talking to other people. So it's very easy for children to talk to each other, and that's why we designed our program to work with young people, especially who are in school, to drive this message themselves, their style. So you see them creating all sorts of messages and all sorts. And of course, our work is also connected to law enforcement because we are an in-hope hotline in Nigeria. So driving the reporting of these issues are also very important. Thank you.
Paul, would you like to?
Yeah, maybe just one point to add. It's I like to compare the internet to other technologies. And like a century ago, we invented the car, and people were driving on the roads. There were no rules, no driving license, nothing. And then they discovered it's a fantastic tool. But it needs to be regulated. And I think the internet is the same thing. It's fantastic for the children. It's fantastic to be interconnected, and it brings all good things. But it needs to be sort of regulated, and people needs maybe a driving license or something similar to learn how to use the internet, to learn what are the risks, where are the boundaries, and all these things.
I'm going to address the question just because it's the technological one. I will say nothing makes an engineer and a company more angry than hearing that their tool is being used in a way it wasn't intended. So that's why de-siloing the data and making sure we're getting the information we're hearing from youth, from law enforcement, to industry is critical, so that way we actually build systems with safety in mind. We know a lot. We know the internet. We know the harms that can happen on it. So we need to make sure we're sharing that better, and that's how you do that. You build it safety by design now. Unfortunately, we can't just recall the whole internet, but we can build it better moving forward.
Thank you, Emily. Daniel?
So to the colleague from IOM, one of the hardest thing about the Disrupting Harm project is kind of what you describe. It's to do trauma-informed interviews with survivors. We're working really hard on that. It's difficult to find people who are actually willing to share their experiences. But over the next year or so, you'll hear more from us on that. It's really, really important.
Yeah, nothing major to add, just to say that we are looking into the key ingredients of interventions that work, but for parents and for school-based type of interventions. So, very interested to learn more about your randomized control trial and, to really, try to distill what are the key components of intervention that work.
Thank you very much, Chiara. And with this, I would like to thank everyone for the attention to this panel and the speakers. And just to say, this is the beginning of a conversation we hope we want to continue with you all. And I will pass it to Nobu for the next panel. Thank you.
Thank you to the panel. Thank you, Serena. Our next panel is solutions to ensure safe connections for children globally. And I have the great task of making sure that we stick to our time for this next panel. So as I call Maria up, you need to pledge to the host that you're going to do better than Ms. Serena. Thank you.
Do I need to press anything? No, it works. Okay. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Maria. I'm the Executive Director of Safe Online. And before I open, I'm getting short, I do want to thank Giga for really making this event possible, because it is not comfortable to speak about child online safety issues, and people oftentimes don't want to even host us or talk about it because it's unpleasant. So Giga, thank you for opening up this somewhat unpleasant conversation that we hope will really create positive and very pleasant experiences for kids online. So with that, last panel was amazing, but it can be sometimes somewhat overwhelming or depressing. So we don't want to leave you with that type of sense. We really want to now discuss a little bit about what we know is working and some of the solutions that we are seeing in this ecosystem. So I'm going to call my panelists to come up. Panelists, can you please join me? I was like, I do have panelists, I promise you. They will be here in a minute. Yes, there you go. Before I start asking you questions, I do want to talk a little bit about, and I think it relates to your question a little bit. When we think about connectivity is almost like water, right? You create a water point, especially if you work in low-resource environments where many other organizations around the table are working to provide water to communities, where there is no. So when you put a water point in a community, you don't just leave. That water needs to be clean and safe. The point where the water is being put in the community needs to be safe for everybody to access. You're not going to put it in some dark corner somewhere where people can't access it, or there's going to be danger for them to get there. So when you think about connectivity is just the beginning at which you need to start thinking about content, devices, what type of experiences, how much time, what does a school mean for connectivity, what can school do to filter content or create positive and well-being focused experiences, and things like that. So when we think about connectivity, we can't assume that connectivity by itself means progress. Connectivity can very much reproduce biases, create exploitation environments for people, or just do things that we have been doing really badly in the developing countries for a very long time. So thinking about these things right now is really critical, and that's why I think Giga is partnering with people like us, but also other communities more broadly with UNICEF to make sure that that connectivity makes sense and it's meaningful for the kids. With that, I have an amazing panel today. I believe so. Next to me is Denton Howard, who is the CEO of the InHope network of hotlines. Next over there is Shima Sengupta. She is the Global Chief of Child Protection for UNICEF. We have Khalid Hadidi, who is the Director of Policies for EU of Roblox. We have Lucia Sotomayor, who is the Child Online Protection Lead for the Office of the Special Representative for Violence Against Children of the Secretary General. And then we have Ken Carswell, who is the Mental Health Specialist at the World Health Organization. So welcome. I want to kick off maybe with you, Shima, because you are, as I always say, the lead of the fiercest of the workforces of UN, which is the UNICEF Child Protection Workforce. You work on a number of really, really important issues for kids, and amongst those is child online protection. And UNICEF has been working on this issue for over, 10 years now. So you've gained a lot of learning. We've been working with you at Safe Online to generate some of those lessons and practices and give them back to the community. Share with us what's working now and what you're seeing as the challenges and opportunities in 4 minutes.
Thank you. No problem. Sorry. Okay, can you hear me, right? Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for organizing this, and for all of you for being here, because it clearly shows that you are interested in protecting children and keeping them safe online. I think, Maria, I want to start with, where you talked about us coming into this panel. I think bringing in some hope, right? And yes, in the last decade, there has been some progress. I know it's not enough progress, because we heard from the last panel what else we need to do. But for me and for UNICEF, I think what we see is one big realization and one big message to go out is it's not a niche area for only one entity. And I think, the panel here, the previous panel reflects that. We come from across all the different entities, and it is so important. So that's one. And to see more and more the different, that industry's involved, the UN's involved, NGOs, everybody. And that's, I think, in itself a big progress. As you know, for UNICEF, we do a lot of the work based on a framework, which is the We Protect National Response Framework. And this actually guides the efforts, national efforts that you have all over the world, looking at skills and capacities and capabilities across the board. So looking at multi-sectoral, so looking at criminal justice, child protection, industry itself, the tech, and all of that. And I think bringing that together has been one of those progress areas. I want to very quickly say an example from Ghana, where, the government themselves were already noticing that between 2017 and 2020, there was a rise, almost double, from 8 million to 15 million internet users, and they wanted to make it safe for children. And so UNICEF, with Safe Online support, began working on this with them, and we brought together all the different players, all the different stakeholders in child protection, because that's what we do best. We bring government counterparts and so on, and we began working on this together. So what we saw was that very quickly, in a very short time, we were able to we were able to get legislation on this, on criminal justice, but we were also able to establish a digital forensic lab to help the government with the investigations. And then, of course, came COVID. And with COVID came this whole thing about, let's get kids online to help them learn, which is great. Please don't get us wrong. Absolutely great. But which we hadn't thought of as quickly was about protecting them while we were doing that. And I think Ghana was a good experience, because they did this whole educative awareness program. They reached 5 million users to create that awareness. So good progress. There are challenges. The challenges, of course, are bringing these very different stakeholders to the same table and to speak the same language, right? Bringing criminal justice, bringing industry, and bringing child protection. All very difficult. These are challenges, but again, I think what we are seeing here is an example of how we are all working together to support children. And there are opportunities. The opportunity is that this is the 35th year of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And I think, again, this is where we can pull it all together, and with all of us saying what it is to protect children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shima, and thank you for being on time. I think one of the most important things that UNICEF really brings to the table is the footprint that it has globally, and how quickly it can really take the lessons learned from few places to other places and create those networks of learning and communication together. Then with GIGA and other partners who work on education, child protection, connectivity, we can really make a huge change. So thank you for that work. Denton, you are the CEO of In Hope Network of Hotlines. For many people here, when I say hotlines, they may have an entirely different idea of what you do than what you actually do. So I would want you to really explain to people the role that hotlines play in the response to child sexual exploitation and abuse online. But also tell us a little bit about how are you working with different sectors? How do you work with industry? How do you work with law enforcement? And what are some of the biggest, as I call them, translation challenges that we have in terms of collecting data, sharing data, understanding how we find child sexual abuse material online, how do we actually then share that across law enforcement agencies and industry so we know what we are searching for and similar things. But you have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, and no pressure. Okay. So first of all, thank you very much for having me here today. My name is Denton Howard, and I'm the Executive Director or CEO of InHope. Now, I'm going to try and answer this in as big a terms as I can. Firstly, I work in what we call a vision-directed organization. We have a vision of a digital world free of child sexual abuse material. Now, CSAM, as we're going to say it, has been defined earlier on, but it's very important. It's a crime scene. There's a victim. There's always a victim. And that is at the center of everything that we do. And actually, that's why we're all here today. Okay, so let's just center this conversation on that. So with that said, Maria was asking, well, what's a hotline? Well, probably not what you think, but a hotline is somewhere that somebody can anonymously tell somebody, I found child sexual abuse material or what appears to be child sexual abuse material. Please do something about it. Because people don't walk into Paul, I don't know where you are, I can't see you with the light. They don't walk into Paul's office, he's down there, and go, look, I found child abuse material. They don't do that because they don't want to be associated with it. So a hotline gives the ability of somebody to say, but without being connected with it. So they're anonymous. Hotlines are individual organizations in different countries. So, for example, the Internet Watch Foundation in the UK, Off Limits in the Netherlands, NECMIC in the US, in Nigeria, where's she gone? I can't, and she mentioned earlier on. So they take reports. Then InHope as an organization, right, we started off with 6 members in 1999. Currently now we've got 54 organizations around the world in every continent that do that process. They take reports in a standardized way because it's always hosted somewhere else. And what they do is to get that content removed from the internet as rapidly as possible. And I say rapid because think of a stopwatch for a second. Imagine there's a stopwatch on that wall going tick, tick, tick. Oh, there we go. No pressure again, right? Let's get 44 minutes into 4 minutes. Okay. So the point is to get that content. So hotlines work together to get that content removed. We have so InHope offers a technical infrastructure to achieve that. It works, and we do that with partnership because partnership is a key. We can't do it on our own. Hotlines are partners, are peers of each other, but we have to have law enforcement partners, and Paul is one of mine, because it's to get that, because we're dealing with the nuclear waste of the internet. It's illegal. All right, it's illegal to possess, so we have to skirt the legislation, and we do that with Interpol as our main law enforcement partner. But we also have to have both individually for hotlines, but also my organization collectively. We need to have the support of law enforcement, industry, because we can't get stuff removed unless the industry cooperate. We need the cooperation of governments because of legislation, because of support features for organizations in country. And then we also have to factor in child welfare because they have to represent the interests of children. We call it the chair principle. So it needs 4 legs for it to succeed. So a hotline needs 4 legs, InHope needs 4 legs, okay? But we can't do it alone. And I took notes, which is unusual for me. So what we have to have is common standards because consistency is the key. And Maria referenced it because there is a project which is what we call, or what was originally called Global Standard is now called Universal Classification Schema. That's a big mouthful. Okay, don't worry about it. But the point is there's a thing called how CSAM data of known content is exchanged. Everybody's doing it a different way. It's like talking about the same thing but using a different language. Okay? Now, what we are trying to do with the support of Safe Online is create, well, we have done it, it's in progress, it's not fully completed yet, it's entering phase 2, which is to get a consistent language that is used by everybody who is tagging child sexual abuse material so that these lists can be used smarter and more efficiently. So if you were an organization, you will be able to take somebody else's list as long as it's been done to that standard. It's not a product, it's a way of doing things. So again, I could talk for 44 minutes on that. Easily, I wouldn't get to it. But I'm going to come back to a point is, none of those things would be achieved without partnership, okay? I can't do it on my own. I need technical, I need physical, I need financial, and equally all of our partners need exactly the same. So it's only by working together over and back. I'm going to come back and finish, because I think I'm at 4 minutes. Yes. I'm going to come back to where I started off at, okay? Is to remember that in all of these conversations, it's all about the victim. The re-victimization, every time an image is reshared, recopied, a victim is abused all over again. And we cannot forget that. It's very easy to forget that when we talk statistics and numbers and everything else, but you got to bring it back to ground zero again. And I'll be honest with you, I work with a hugely fantastic team of people who are really motivated, but they all look to the vision. We stick it on the wall everywhere we go. So with that, I'm going to finish talking. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Denton. And one thing that I also want to mention is if you really want to know more about what we are seeing, Denton also has a tremendous amount of data and information about the trends. So one of the trends that we always keep on talking about is that victims are becoming younger. We can't do now education with teenagers only. We have to engage with kids way, way, way younger than we have been so far. So that's something to think about. But again,
can I just throw one comment in there?
Go there.
Okay. Just in terms of, just in case you're thinking child abuse material is the teenagers, we're talking about CSAM, the vast, vast majority is in the 3 to 13, and the vast majority of that is in the lower half of that range. Okay, so just to be aware, and this trend is getting younger. Okay, so just to be aware of that.
Thank you for that. You mentioned how important it is to work with industry, and that's why here today we have Roblox representation, and Khalid has been kind enough to come and join us. Who, I guess everybody knows what Roblox is, but it is one of the largest global playgrounds for gamers and kids. And with that comes, I think, even heightened responsibility in terms of child online safety. And we can be really working closely with Roblox and other technology partners on a number of initiatives and conversations in that regard. So Khalid is going to tell us a little bit more about what Roblox is doing on child online safety, but also how do they balance that with other policy considerations in the digital ecosystem, as well as how do you think, maybe Khalid, a little bit more about safety, the famous safety by design. How does that look like in practice?
Thank you very much for the invitation to Roblox. I will do a short intro to Roblox, just in case people don't know what Roblox is. Roblox, provides tools and platforms which empowers people to create their own sort of like virtual experiences. And essentially, it's a global community. 77 million people come to our platform every day on average. And essentially, they come to share, interact, and have adventure on our platform. And they could do, they can have an adventure in terms of, going and sort of like to a concert, for example, or going to a pizza parlor, or learning how to code and program games. And so essentially safety has always been essential, fundamental to our platform. This is because kids have always been on our platform. And that's what's really why we have always been, foundation really important to us. And so in terms of sort of like when we do safety, it's always, instead of retrofitting it, we have a process called trust by design. And essentially, whenever we introduce a new product onto our platform, our designers and product managers will bring all of us together cross-functionally and sit us down, so there'll be people from legal, people from operations, safety, and we will give them feedback regarding what the impact of this product will be on our users. And they will take this into account, and they will either go back to the drawing board and give up on that idea, or use that feedback and sort of like make sure that when products are released, there will be a beta, and eventually all this safety is taken into account. So this is where sort of like Roblox comes in. And one of the things, one of the other aspects I really want to talk about was policy. I know has things improved? I think where policy, particularly at the European level with the Digital Services Act and the UK level, the Online Safety Act, things haven't had an impact on how platforms are operating. Roblox all prides themselves that I said earlier that we always carry out a safety risk in terms of the way we moderate as well. So anything and all the so in terms of we've always had restrictive policies essentially. So if you come to Roblox, we have chat filtering tools. Kids cannot give their names on our platform, for example, or any personal information. We have asset moderation tools. So if there's say CSAM, which is uploaded in our platform, we would use AI and human moderation to ensure that it does not go on our platform as well. We also use the latest technology to make sure our platform is safe as possible. And as we also sort of grow mature in terms of sort of attracting mature audiences, we're using state-of-the-art technology, AI, to make sure our platform is safe. Furthermore, I don't know if you want any more want to go about in terms of my timing. I think the other bits we're working on is we have partnerships, we're collaborating with the wider industry, also with NGOs and organizations like yourselves. We're unique, I think, in the tech platform that we have a civility arm. And there, what we want to do is, while sort of like company's mission is to have 1 billion users to reach with optimism and civility. And so we really would like to have an internet which is very civil. We want to change behavior. And I think we have shown sort of like changes in behavior on our platform. We have introduced voice chat on our platform. And kids being kids, if they are sort of like, do wrong things, we nudge them to say, look, this is not very nice. And I think what that has done is actually improve behavior on our platform. So these are the types of technology examples I can give where we have worked to improve sort of behavior on the platform. And I think the other bits our civility team is doing is producing education resources as well as sort of like, trying to improve media literacy and digital literacy on our platform. And I think that's really important, to ensure that our kids are empowered in being able to sort of like, meet the challenges of being on the internet, all the benefits we have in terms of creativity, but we want to make sure they're sort of like really well-developed kids on our platform who are users on our platform.
Thank you so much, Khalid. And I think one message for me here is that the industry has also made a long way in terms of progress, because in many ways technology sector is all seen as unicorns and they're super fast and they're like, things have to be done very differently, and there is not much consideration for safety or diversity in the development processes. And I think that is also changing right now, because we are seeing much more focus on really trying to figure out, and that was a combination of their learning but also pressure, and I think that pressure is always good, to create some sense around what does the impact assessment look like on human rights, on child online safety, how do we take a vulnerability lens, how do we include women and kids into planning, because as we know, internet was built by a bunch of guys, and like there was not much thought about how will that impact other communities or marginalized people or women. So I think there is a lot of learning that has happened since, and especially companies who have a large child population in terms of users are starting to take this more seriously. Thanks for that. Lucia, speaking of kids and speaking of industry, we don't want to leave people thinking it's only bad things online and the kids just have really bad, experiences. Kids are also using the online world to seek help, whether that's help for conditions they have online or experiences, or help for things that they're facing in their everyday lives outside of the digital environments. You have started a really interesting collaboration with ITU, but that partnership is also expanding, called Protection Through Online Participation, or shortly POP. It makes me want to repeat it all the time, POP. So POP is really an effort to gear the online world to the needs of the kids when they need it the most. So tell us more about POP.
Is it working? Yeah. Okay. Yes, thank you for that, and thank you so much for this invitation. And yes, POP is a joint initiative between the Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children. If you can repeat that, I'll give you an applause. And ITU, but with a wide range of partners from UNICEF, Roblox industry, child helplines, CSOs, that look to understand how children are using the internet for real life problems, and not just for problems that are related to children's online engagements. If a child is experiencing in-person sexual violence, they may go online and connect to a child helpline, that is different to a hotline, and it's a service where they can reach out and ask for help, talk to a counselor, report violence, or if they're having a bad day in school, mental health problems, they can reach out. Generally, child protection is taken forward through in-person means, right? So we have trained professionals like health professionals, social workers, people in schools who know how to detect when a child is being victim of violence, because children don't report violence for a number of reasons. They may be scared. They may be embarrassed. They may be threatened not to report. They may not know that what they're experiencing is called violence. That's why we have adults who help detect that. What we saw with COVID, when services were interrupted, is that children were disconnected from those protection services, and not new, but the online children reaching out for help through online means increased. Child Helpline International, their report that year showed that they had to increase in 20% their volunteers that had to address children's concerns through online means. And we also saw how children, and to the point on peer-to-peer from the previous panel, how children were also creating solutions to address the protection needs of their peers. So for example, a girl in Poland, and the people who went to the panel yesterday, sorry, I'm repeating the example, a girl in Poland during COVID created a website that was a fake cosmetic store. Depending on the kind of makeup that you were buying, the type of harm that you may be experiencing and the type of help that you needed. It was anonymous. Very often, the perpetrators of sexual violence are people that within the circle of trust of a child, right? So they may be living in the same household. A website that allows to report via text, allows anonymity. They could connect to the police, and they could actually talk to a sales assistant who is a protection officer who would guide them through their process. So we're seeing how the internet is also being an entry point to being safer when at risk of experiencing different forms of harm. And how is that happening? And that's why we created POP with the goal of understanding the helplines perspective, how they were transitioning online, activating online channels, some being born online, how did they train their staff, how did it impact their budget, what were the benefits of using technologies, the challenges, which were the forms of violence children were consulting around. And I loved it that Daniel provided some data, because child helplines confirmed that via online, sexual violence, online violence, bullying were amongst the most popular forms of violence that were reaching out for help, but also child marriage, child labor, armed conflict. So the internet being used to address in-person harms. We started working with the industry. Roblox is one of our partners, Meta, TikTok, Snapchat, asking them, have you seen this happening in your platforms? Have you seen children using your platforms to ask for help, even though the harm may not be happening in your platform? Yes, the response was unanimous. What are you doing about it? And we've been working with the industry to try and identify good practices, a lot of in-country partnerships between child helplines, government, and industry in order to respond to children. How can industry detect harm? Because one thing is a child saying, I need help, I am being a victim of violence, and then the other thing is a child showing signals of distress through their online engagement, and how does industry detect and connect? We're working with industry with that. And finally, how do we inform policymakers? How do we make sure that a country's protection system also considers the online environment as an entry point to safety and not just as a source of harm? Again, we do need to make the internet safer. My boss, the SRG, made the point at the beginning, so I'm talking about the positive, but she talked about the challenges. So that's Bob. I know you're looking at me with that face, and I'm starting to get scared, so over. Thank you.
Thank you, Luta, so much. And wow, I'm turning out to be like a scary person. One thing that I want to mention is that, and this is, you've seen this through your work, we've seen this through our work, it is really, sorry to say, ridiculous to expect that a child will pick up a phone and call for help. Like, I'm 40, I don't call anybody, I text. Like, you don't do, like, children, we need to meet them where they are and offer them opportunities to actually connect with each other and others in a way that is now more adjusted to what, their ways of living. So I think that is one of the things that we were also seeing is we were developing chatbots for sexual and reproductive health, for getting kids opportunities to learn about those things. And kids were telling us, we don't really care whether this chatbot sounds like a woman or a girl or a boy, or like, we know it's not human. Like, we know it's a robot. Like, we just want somebody to give us shame-free advice and way to speak about issues that we care about. Is that that is not the end of the panel. Ken, we're going to get to you right now. So Ken works on mental health as with the World Health Organization. He's been driving some of the interesting work around digital mental health, and he's going to keep us on the topic of solutions. what have you seen work? Because we know we need to go to scale very fast. We know some of the issues, especially around mental health of kids, are growing. We need to figure out ways, how can we leverage technology and the online world to provide kids well-being, both in terms of promotion, but also prevention and treatment. Over to you.
No, thank you, Maria, and thank you for inviting me to speak on this. So yeah, I'm going to take you more into the area of mental health here, which is obviously very related to many of the topics we've been talking about today. And in terms of solutions, I think we've already heard some of them from the panel. You know, hearing about the work of how do you connect people online to support that they need, hearing about safety by design and aspects like that. I think there are several other big aspects that might work. And I'm going to talk quite generally about one of them and then get more specific about actually what can we do online. Now, I'd say that the bigger one that I'd like to talk about is what can we do on the technology platform side. Now, and we've heard already about things like safety by design, but I'd say another big aspect is collaboration around research. You know, if we think about some of the major questions that we're asking right now about what are the impacts of digital on mental health and on safety, all of that will come back to having evidence, knowing what the answers are, and obviously at WHO we work very much from the evidence. So I'd say that one of the first bits would be, how can we start getting more open access evidence? How can we start getting more research from tech platforms, combine it, look at it, open source it, crowdsource it, have really good high quality research that will help us answer some of the key questions. And I think given, you know, how things are changing so quickly, the use of AI and things like this, it's very important to do that probably as quickly as we can. And we see success from things like this. Like we've seen success from open access publishing and the open access movement. Emotional learning courses and packages like that. So, you know, one platforms, we can start using that as a dissemination route. But we can probably also do quite sort of fun things with it. I was sort of thinking, like, what could you do on Roblox with a social emotional learning package? You know, what can we do that's quite innovative, that engages people, that meets young people where they are? So I think there's something about using the content that we know works. I think another aspect is then around helping people to access the health information that they need, the well-being information that they need. So again, this is using big platforms to provide evidence-based, authoritative, high-quality information to people so that they can access the help and support that they need, or they can learn. They can learn and have health promotion messages and similar. And then I guess the third area I'd like to talk about is really around specifically around what we might call digital self-help or digital interventions. So one of the things that we know from extensive research is that self-help interventions and promotion and prevention interventions, these work very well. So at WHO, we released with UNICEF a set of guidelines called Helping Adolescents Thrive, and that details a lot of the prevention and promotion work and how a lot of that can be done online. And then another aspect of our work has been looking at things like digital self-help. So for example, we know that if you have a self-help book or a self-help app, that these things can help to reduce depression, anxiety, and other issues in young people and in adults. And we've been testing an app and developed a chatbot at WHO for reducing depression and anxiety in young people, and we've been trialing it in randomized controlled trials. So we don't have the data yet, whether it was successful, but it's an example of how we can use things, both what we call unguided self-help, which is when people just get the help without any guidance, which can work fairly well, but sort of quite a small effect size. But we can also do guided self-help, which is when you give that same source of support with a little 10-minute telephone call or chat message from a trained helper or from someone like that. And if you integrate these things within a health system or within a social care system, I think we can then start addressing some of these key aspects. So in short, there's many things I think we could be doing. Some we know work already, some we could be thinking quite creatively and innovating around it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. I hope that this panel is giving you a sense of what type of things you can build on an infrastructure if there is connectivity. You can add all these helpline ecosystem, hotline ecosystem, digital mental health solutions, more education resources, more access to play and socializing. There's a bunch of stuff that can happen that is really great for kids, which promotes their well-being as opposed to being geared towards heightened risks and exacerbating that. We really need to work more on collaboration, shareability, interoperability of tools, open source thinking, where we can really start creating efficiencies in the ecosystem of how we share learning, data, resources, signals of how risk and harm happen, and how can we address these. So I think overall, collaboration is the key, but also structural ways in which we can achieve that collaboration. We know how difficult that is at times when everybody builds for their own platform and not for the ecosystem. So I'll stop there. We have 10 minutes for questions. We're still doing a little bit better. Opening up for questions.
Hi, thank you so much for your insights. My name is Lisa, and I'm with the UNICEF Giga team. I'm just curious what your thoughts are about some legislative measures such as age gating on social media platforms, and whether or not you think that would make, a difference in the trends that we're seeing.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And I mean, depending on also how you approach this, there is like age assurance, age gating, no matter how you want to call it. But maybe, Khalid, do you want to take a stab at that from the policy perspective, and then we'll ask others as well?
So I think there are two issues there, right? I think in terms of, we've always taken into account that children should have access to information and entertainment, and also they need to be safe. And so we've provided sort of like parental control tools as well, so, trying to empower parents. And in terms of sort of like age verification, I think it really, we have for plus 17, sort of ID verification on our platform. But at the moment, I think the evidence really, it's really difficult, right, in terms of how do you sort of like, say, have age verification in a country where there is no national identity, or do you use a credit card? Credit cards are not available everywhere. How do you sort of, what is the age verification method you are going to use to age gate, really? And that's where sort of like really the debate is at the moment. And I think the EU is going to experiment with a digital wallet, which is going to be very privacy friendly. That's another issue that you need to take into account. For example, if you have a 13 or 14-year-old who wants to ask a question to someone without their parents wanting to, let their parents know about it, how do you ensure privacy, right? So these are sort of like public interest questions you also have to bear into account when you talk about age gating as well. So it's really, I think technology is improving all the time, and I think the digital wallet, which will come into force around 2026, is going to be a game changer in this area. And I think all of us in the online industry will have to look at that and how we sort of like approach that. And I think that's probably, it's going to be really change the attitude of all platforms, I think.
Thanks, Khalid. I think Denton wants to add something.
Just on the, because I deal in things after the bad things have happened, so I'm going to talk from a sort of society and a parent perspective, is that the real important thing is, if you look at the financial services industry, or they have a policy called KYC. You know your customer. You're obligated to know your customer. Obviously, there are different grades, and the digital wallet is going to go a long way to, in the online world, to you're not going to know exactly the person's name, but you're going to know that they're a valid real person. But one of the downsides is that the key obstacle to bad behavior, and I'm just going to say bad behavior on the internet, let's be polite about it, is that people only do bad things when they have no fear of getting caught. If you go and flash around your ID badge and then you say, and I want to read sex abuse or child sex abuse material, then you're not. No, they won't do it. So the key issue here is about people need to have a situation where not necessarily that your personal data needs to be available, but you have to be responsible, and so you can't get in without a driver's license that was mentioned earlier on. You need to have some form of, that it can backtrack to you so that it's, I know there are civil liberties people who will argue that, well, we're talking about child sexual abuse material. I don't care. You know, they're more important.
Lucia.
Yeah, I want to add totally a different angle as well. And somebody mentioned when the internet was created, right? And the internet was created with adult users in mind, right? And not just adult users, but the perfect user. Before the World Wide Web, the initial version, which was created as a tool to transmit secret information during the war, right? In a universal language of ones and zeros, the user of that internet had to know exactly how the internet would work. If I was going to send you an email and my email would go through 1,000 computers to get to you, I had to know the exact route that my email would go through. That's a perfect user. That's a user that understands absolutely everything that is happening within that system, right? The internet, as we very well know, evolved. It became the World Wide Web, open and discriminatory, open for everyone, looking for freedom, etc. But the modes of engagement remained for an adult user and with a primarily adult user in mind. And we're still expecting the world and children to adapt to that, and instead of trying to rethink those rules of engagement, considering that increasingly more and more children are going online, and children are going online, as we know, at younger ages. And even though there are, minimum age requirements, they are not met, and younger children than those. So I think we also need to look at it from the perspective of how the system adapts. When we talk about child-friendly by design, it's assuming privacy by default, assuming that the user behind the screen needs protection. So another angle. Over.
There's one more question in there. Thank you so much, Lucia.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm from Giga. I just have a down-the-line question for the panel. It's like a one-word answer. Assuming it's really one-word answer. I mean, maybe two if it's well, it depends on one or two. Assuming the internet as we know it today, and assuming that your kid is not so annoying that you have to give in to everything they say to you. And assuming Roblox that there isn't a bottom line question of income for Roblox because of the answer that you're going to give, so we won't tell anybody. What do you actually think the age is that you should let your kid use the internet in an unsupervised manner? Just like unsupervised manner, just by themselves in their room. What's your bottom line age for where you'd really feel comfortable letting your kid do that?
But with parental control.
No, like you just say to your kid, you're on, because kids can get around parental control, right? That's much smarter than, what's the age where you would feel comfortable personally letting your kid be on the unsupervised open internet without your looking at them? My answer is like 40, but.
I was like in Montenegro, by the way, like especially for boys, like you consider a boy until 40, so like maybe 40. Anyways, Denton.
I'm going to apply the rule that applied when I was growing up, which was that when you were old enough to walk around the street on your own, so in my case, that was about 4, okay? And I'm being serious. I'm being deadly serious. So, but my point being, if you're able to go outside on the street on your own, within the environment, out playing on the street where you live, that's the age, because it's bad things will happen in everywhere. But the thing is, you have to teach your child to cross the road properly. You have to teach your child not to talk to strangers. You have to teach your child to do, put your helmet on when you get on the bike. Okay.
But the roads need to be safe, and also the neighborhood has like community
true.
officer, and their neighbors who take care of it, and yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not taking out the obligations of the vendor of the products or anything like that. But if you ask me, that's the question.
4 is 4. Okay. Surprising.
I'm going to go with as far as possible, as late as possible, because we don't have all those safety things on the street yet.
What's the number?
35, 40. I have a 28-year-old, so I'm still thinking.
I'm an internet native, and I think my parents did not know what I was doing on the internet. So, I mean, I think I sort of subscribe to Denton's view in many ways. And I think that goes also, you know, hopefully you give your children some level of digital literacy, media literacy. You do include parental control. My child hasn't sort of like, does not know how to override parental control tools, and she's 8 as well. But I think it's really important that she does have some engagement with digital content as well, and sort of like also builds her own curiosity and skepticism.
You're not getting one word, Chris, sorry. I think, okay, really difficult because you're basically asking when do you let go, right? Because when you say completely free and supervised, you're meaning, you know, you're saying we know that harm's there and we're just saying go towards that harm. And I agree as far away as possible. If I had to say a number, 18, like at least you're not underage.
I've run out of time, unfortunately, so I can't answer it. No, seriously, this is obviously my opinion, not WHO's. Very quickly, some point in the teens, I can't give an answer. But what I would say is I think it's the same as any sort of parenting issues. I mean, if you've got a kid who's 14, 15, you're still talking to them about the world, about like sex, about like risks, about this and that. So I sort of feel it should maybe be the same on the internet as well. Like you could have conversations about what's been seen or what the risks are and what isn't. So I'll be thinking, yeah, later and to keep that conversation up.
I'm feeling now like in Mission Impossible, I'm supposed to run and cut the wire. Because like now we get 22 seconds left. I will not, I mean, I don't know how to conclude this panel. It was really amazing to listen to all of you and learn from you. There is so many questions that are popping in my head and examples. I will say that when we speak about giving kids the empowerment and the knowledge and the learning they need to navigate safely the online world, we need to understand that not every child has a safe, nurturing, and available family to them to do that for them. Yeah. I did not have that. Many people across the world don't have it. So when we think about like, oh, parents should teach their kids how to navigate the streets or some parents don't have that. Some kids don't have that. So let's think also about all the kids and the safety of all the kids, not only those who live in resourced environments where their parents know how to give them the support they need. So with that, over to Nobu.
Thank you, Maria. You kept the time, even though Chris tried to derail us. Chris, see me in my office after this, okay? And that's my boss, so. All right, just a quick overview of what we've discussed so far. We started off with Dr. Najat, who gave us some interesting stats in terms of what's happening in the world out there. Then our first panel walked us through a lot of real moments. We heard from law enforcement and how they're going undercover, trying to snuff out these perpetrators. We heard from the research team and the work that they're putting in out there. We also heard from an important piece. I'm a mom and I have a son, and that really stayed with me, where we don't do enough messaging for boys. So that's one key piece that I'm taking away with me to make sure that I'm educating my son a lot more. And then this last panel, which was really centered on the solutions that we should be leveraging for our children. I'm a Roblox user. I don't use it. My son and daughter invite me onto the platform to play with them, and I really think it's such a great tool that has enabled us to stay connected when we're far apart. Chris asked us a very interesting question. What is the age? As I was listening to the discussion, I asked myself, what would I say to my 12-year-old son who started using the internet when he was, I think, 5. He started with Fortnite, and it's been downhill since then. It's a tough one. So I think with that, we will lead into our 15-minute break. And I do encourage you to have this discussion because it's very important. Not only are we professionals, we're also parents who have followed the rules. And some of us may not have been aware of the rules. And this is the time to have that conversation and understand what we need to be doing. 15 minutes. I'm very strict with time, so I'm watching you. Thank you. Okay, we have 3 minutes. 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Thank you. Let's make our way back, please. Let's start to make our way back. Let's make our way back, please. Thank you. It's time to head back. Thank you. Let's make our way back. Thank you. Let's make our way back, please. We're starting in 2 minutes.
Just 1 second, they won't take a photo, then we start. She's going to punish me. They were going to take a photo of the partner.
Elisa. How are you? I'm fine. My mic is on. Thank you. May we please find our seats as we prepare to have our keynote speaker coming up? Thank you. Much better. Thank you, everybody. I hope we had a delightful break and engaging conversations during the time. I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker for today, our Secretary General from ITU, Doreen Bogdan-Martin. Thank you so much for making the time. Please come up.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see some of you again that were with us over the past 2 days for our first Giga Connectivity Forum. And I think, Chris, our discussions could not be complete unless we focused on the safety aspects and online safety, which are absolutely critical. So I do want to thank Safe Online for the invitation and really for syncing this up perfectly with the work that we've been doing around school connectivity. And I also want to thank my friend and colleague. I guess she joined from New York, Carla. Is that where Najat joined from before? So really appreciate all the efforts that she makes as the special representative of the UNSG on violence against children. And we've been working with her for a number of years and look forward to also strengthening that partnership. I know it was discussed before that it's the 35th anniversary of the adoption on the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And we certainly recognize that. But it's also that same year that the convention was adopted was when the World Wide Web, and I think some of you were up at CERN this morning, was also invented not too far from where we are today. But of course, at that time, we didn't have social media. We didn't have the internet, really. And things were different when we thought about how to protect our children. And so 35 years plus, we are more and more concerned when it comes to what happens online, from increases in cyberbullying, to violent content, to hate speech, of course, fraudulent financial schemes that often young people are subject to, and online sexual exploitation and abuse. And we know that children face not just these risks, but quite a long list of risks when they go online. And on top of that, and we were speaking, Maria, before about the AI for Good Global Summit, and of course we are also very focused on the good that AI can bring, but we're also very focused on the risks and the bad that can come, and that also impacts young people when we think about things like deepfakes and other forms of manipulation that young people can be exposed to. You've probably heard some of the numbers, and I saw some of the numbers on the screen. They're quite terrifying. Already over 300 million children a year face sexual abuse online. We know that those consequences can also be very devastating, and that's why ITU thinks that when we embark on our mission to connect the world, we need to make sure we do it responsibly and that we do it safely. So child online protection has been something at our core, I would say, since as far back as 2008. And then we advanced things further with our Child Online Protection Initiative and the launch of our guidelines. We now have some 50 partners, and I think, Carla, we're getting stronger and stronger each year, and we would invite you to also join us in that important initiative. In addition to the Child Online Protection Initiative, without getting into nitty bureaucratic details of ITU, we have a council working group, as it's called, but that means it's a group with our member states, and what's quite unique about this group is that it's open to all stakeholders. And so it's a Child Online Protection Council Working Group, as we call it. What's quite interesting is that group's been around for many years, but in the past couple of years, we've seen more and more participation and more contributions that we're now trying to figure out how do we get those contributions, which document different approaches, case studies, how do we get them out to the world at large. We also have a number of programs where we focus on digital literacy, because digital literacy can be also a key way to help young people protect themselves. We talk about cyber hygiene, that's about the good practices, and I think that's really fundamental. And of course, with GIGA and the GIGA Connectivity Forum, I think the past 2 days demonstrate how important connectivity is to education and how important it is to make sure that when we're connecting schools and we're educating professors who are then educating young people through new means, that we build in online protection as part of that initiative. And look forward, Chris, to getting your thoughts from the GIGA team as to how we can best do that. Because we know that connectivity and technology can unleash vast educational opportunities for, I think, the world at large. We have been thinking about the UNSG's conclusions of the recently launched Sustainable Development Goals report from 2024. As the report noted, the sort of results are sobering, depressing maybe is a better word, with 17% of the targets on track, big gaps, new concerns, including in the space of online protection. And so we have to do better. One of the things that's noted in the context of the report is that some 20% of the world's youth actually don't use the internet or haven't used the internet, which is unfortunate, but I think also when we look to GIGA, it's a huge opportunity to get connectivity out there and to make sure that we do it safely. When it comes to young people, since I took my function up last year in January, I've been very focused on making sure that young people are included in the ITU workforce, but also in all of our activities that we offer externally for our member states, for the private sector, civil society, and of course, academia. I set up a youth task force internally, which has developed a very serious and exciting action plan for the institution so that we can change some of the ways we do things internally. And I also set up my own youth advisory board. So I have 12 young people, 6 men, 6 women, from the 6 ITU regions that were selected through quite an intensive process. We had 800-something applicants. It's not a paid position, and we have gathered them on a number of occasions already this year to get their advice about how we work, what kinds of programs we offer, and how we can make them more relevant to young people. And I'm excited to move that forward as well. We're also excited, and I don't know, Carla, if it was mentioned previously, but this is something we do with Dr. Najat, the Protection Online Participation Initiative. I think that's also quite critical. It's a really good example of how data-driven projects can help us to identify the most effective online safety tools and the best services for children. It really helps us to amplify what the needs are and be able to meet those needs. I think also we're excited about the newly launched global network to expand the reach and effectiveness of online safety education. This is an ITU project that is funded by Safe Online, so thank you for that. We're excited to be advancing that. We're working with global stakeholders from around the world, but very focused on the global south, and it will help us to be able to build something extensive, fit for purpose when it comes to a repository of different practices happening around the world to be able to adapt to different circumstances that countries are facing. And so with that, ladies and gentlemen, again, really it's critical that we're connecting this with GIGA so that when we look to engaging and connecting communities, we look to engaging and connecting the schools in those communities, that we put young people and their interest at the center. And to do that, we have to make sure that when we're connecting people to the online world, that it's safe it's empowering, and it brings good to those people. But as we see, the concerns and the fears are growing, and it's really a moment for all of us to come together and make sure we put in place the best practices and make sure we also empower young people to protect themselves. So look forward to strengthening our cooperation, and really hope that for those of you that haven't been engaged on this topic before, that you will join us to make sure the internet is a safer place for all people. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our Secretary General for the excellent keynote that we've just received. What I learned was that Safe Online funds some of the IT work when it comes to child online safety. I enjoyed hearing how we're weaving into Giga connectivity and the fact that as we go into connect schools, we need to be conscious of the work that we're doing as we expose children to the internet and making sure that we're doing it in a safe manner. We are now heading into our next segment, which is titled Reflections on the Future. And this is an exciting piece because we have a great panel that's closing us off. And this panel is the last panel between us and our networking reception, which I'm sure will have a lot of engaging conversations once again. On this panel, we're going to have Kathy Lee, our head of AI, data, and metaverse at the World Economic Forum. Kathy Lee, may you please come up to set the stage for us? And she's going to be joined after by Chris and Maria to have a round discussion on what the future looks like. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Can you hear me? Good. Thank you to Safe Online and UNICEF Giga for having me and also having me closing this very important discussion. I've already been introduced, so not going to go into much more details. I also co-head the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution at the forum, which is the center that looks at all of the technology topics. And I'm personally responsible for AI, data policy, digital safety, trust, and metaverse work. It's a pleasure being here with all of you. So Maria asked me to really set the stage for the session, but Doreen already did such a wonderful job. So all I wanted to say is really, I think, with digital safety being such an important topic, and for me personally, when I first started this role back to 5 years ago, that at the forum, it was actually the first work I started, the Global Safety, Global Coalition for Digital Safety at the forum. And why do we do that? Because if you think about all of the important issues and topics that's on the CEO agenda in Davos, which, Doreen is a frequent guest to this important meeting, a lot of the times, the CEOs don't really want to talk about some of the uglier topics, and digital safety is one of them. So the importance of really starting this coalition and really having the topic being on top of the CEO agenda is to really acknowledge there are things that the private sector can do. There are things that the public sector can contribute more. There are things that civil society and academia already dedicated a lot of the time and effort into that can really be high on the agenda. So that's really why this topic is so close to my heart, and it's truly a pleasure to be here today. So what this panel, what we wanted to talk about today is really the emerging technologies. I think unless you live under a rock, you will know that during the past year or so, AI is really, truly at the, well, I wouldn't say it's at the peak of the cycle. It's not there yet. If you just look at NVIDIA's stock price, how that's been performing over the last 18 months, you know that it's not even there yet. It's going to continue to grow. But what does that mean when it comes to digital safety and the impact on other important areas? I think we've already seen a proliferation of child sexual abuse material as well as exploitation materials leveraging that's generated by AI during the last year, and we're seeing more and more of the disinformation and misinformation exacerbated by AI as well. So, for example, a recent report from the Internet Watch Foundation found that most of the AI CSAM is now realistic enough to be treated as a real CSAM. And the most convincing AI CSAM is visually indistinguishable from the real CSAM, even for trained analysts. And the text-to-image technology will only get better. We've seen that from the release of Sora from OpenAI and many other technology providers over the last few months, and that's going to pose more challenges for the law enforcement agencies as well. The mis and disinformation have also been identified in the Forum's Global Risks Report for the next 2 years, highlighting the risks for more polarization and even censorship. So it's important, but at the same time, it's also important to recognize that Gen AI can also be part of the solution to these challenges. AI technology is not only used to create content, but also to tackle harmful content effectively. There are many companies and startups that's already working on it, and we continue to applaud their effort there. And concretely for children, emerging technologies present both opportunities and risks, and I think we all know that here in this room with this audience. Because on one hand, imagine technologies such as AI and immersive technologies, XR and augmented reality as well. They can make learning much more personalized and engaging. Imagine a classroom where each child can learn at their own pace, guided by AI tutors, and immersed in the virtual worlds. That could definitely make complex subjects come to life. For any of you who have tried the Vision Pro by Apple recently, I think you probably would feel the same as well. But on the other hand, we must protect children from the potential harms of digital exposure. This includes digital safety interventions such as parental controls, ensuring age-appropriate content, and safeguarding their privacy. I'm just going to stop there for now because I look forward to chatting more with Maria and Chris on this topic. So if I can invite both of you onto the stage.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for being here. And I always love, well, sometimes I think our lunches get a little bit dark in terms of like how we foresee the future, but I always look into you to look in the latest trends and know where we need to be and how to convene the right people to start tackling those issues. So thank you for that. I think Doreen mentioned this at her speech, but also this comes through in your remarks. The potential of technology is infinite in many ways. We can use it for so many things that we never would have ever been possible to do before. And I remember, maybe Chris, we can kick off with like a question to you. I remember when Giga was in its infancy a few years back, and people were saying, well, you really can't map all the schools in the world, or it's going to be so difficult. How are you going to do that? What is the methodology for that? And then you and the team have come up with many ways in which you've been combining latest technologies, AI, to make sure that happens. So we can at least know where the schools are, and then we can approach the issue of connectivity as the next step. Share a little bit about how did you get to that point, that how AI was used for good.
Thank you. And yeah, I guess we're going to have a kind of dark panel, but we'll try to make it a little bit fun. But I guess, so, you know, everybody's seen the maps, the Giga maps, I think, a lot over the last few days. If you were at our panel, if you haven't, go to maps.giga.global, and you can look at a map of the world where you see connectivity through the lens of schools. But maybe talk for a second about why we're doing that. We're doing that because we have we're very afraid of the future and what the future holds. And I guess before that, I just want to ask everybody, I'm going to do a hand-raising thing, because just get again, you were just in coffee, but let's wake up a little more. So just show of hands, do you think that, raise your hand if you think the next 10 years is going to be better for you than the last 10 years. You think the next 10 years is going to be generally better for you in your life than the last 10 years? Just better. Just don't think about the question too much. Okay. Now, raise your hand if you think the next 10 years is going to be better for the billion poorest people in the world than the last 10 years was for them. Okay. There's a huge difference in the world between people who are in the schools that are green, in those dots that are green on our map, the connected world, and the people who live in the red world, in the world without connectivity, which also means without electricity, without clean water. That divide is growing bigger and bigger. And part of the reason it's going bigger is because this technology that we're able to take advantage of in this room, in this city, in this country, the medical stuff, you can now get an MRI augmented with AI for less than 5,000 franc, and the price is going to go down. You can see everything you never even wanted to see in your body. That technology for the wealthy is going to be more and more accessible, and the cost of being poor is going to get higher. And one of the reasons that we at Giga are so committed to having a real view of the world and making sure that it's more equitable is because that divide is bad for everybody. And it's most bad and most terrible for the poorest people. So when we started building this map, it was really to allow us to get a sense of this digital gulf, because it's not a divide. A divide makes it seem like you can bridge it. It is huge, and it is almost insurmountable. And the only thing that can scale big enough, fast enough, to stop that spreading nature of technology, of dividing us, is technology itself. But in order to find that technology that can actually be used for good, we have to work really, really hard. And so Giga is dedicated to making sure we can identify those gaps and also the technologies that can help us make some bit of a difference in this really rapidly and unpleasantly changing world. I have a question for you too, but that was my thing. And that's sort of depressing. But on a happier note, I mean, you also invest a lot in AI in your work. And I think that the companies that you see, we even heard today about sort of scaling up against this growing CSAM epidemic. Maybe what's your impression? Does that track with what we see at Giga?
I mean, again, going back to the divide, in the ecosystem of child online safety, you have this places of the ecosystem, there is no data. We know nothing. There is stuff like, what do kids experience in certain environments, and how are they coping with those things, and how can you talk to them about these experiences? There's such lack of even sense of what we need to do and how can we speak to kids that really scares us. We really need to, and that's why we are at Safe Online investing a lot more in research. But there is this other part of the ecosystem that has overwhelm of data, and that part is the scary part. That is the part where we have child sexual abuse material, images and videos, but also other harmful content exponentially growing. And for us to be able to, well, I'll speak a little bit about that as well, but clean that from these harmful things that are spreading like a virus in the online ecosystem, you need to use technology. So we have been investing a lot in using AI for identification of unknown or unseen previously child sexual abuse material, which is combining classifiers for nudity, sexual activity, skin color, and things like that, because we don't want to leave aside people of different colors, right? Because like so far everything has been geared towards white people. So stuff like that we have been investing a lot in, and we are seeing that a lot of companies are using that. So for example, the classifier that Emily was talking about from Thorn, we have been supporting that to make sure that not only law enforcement has these classifiers and these tools, but also industry is using them at scale. And it's really important to have also uniformity in how we are approaching that detection process, so we can also generate efficiencies as the ecosystem, again, not as individual platform. And I think that's where we want to really be. So AI is helping us a lot in that sense. But at the same time, when we speak about AI, what we normally don't speak about is, well, it needs data. And a lot of that data is sitting in silos, and a lot of those silos don't want to communicate to each other or share that data. And there is lack of governance framework, there's a lot of understanding around those things. So we are seeing a lot of barriers to open source thinking and sharing, so we can train the data models and AI models to be able to help us with these issues, whether those are identification of images or grooming activity or text-based stuff that we willing to have leveraged. So we invest a lot in cutting-edge technologies. But again, I want to go back to the barrier, and maybe Kathy, you can tell us more about that, which is you have started the AI Governance Alliance, and I think it is going to tackle some of these issues, or it's trying to at least create framework under which we can talk about what is the future of AI, how can we govern it for the good as opposed to increase the harms. Tell us a little bit more.
Absolutely. So the forum has always dedicated our effort to promote responsible, trustworthy, and ethical adoption of the technologies. When generative AI really came through, you can imagine many of the private sector companies are asking the question, how do I adopt it? Do I buy it from someone? Do I invest in it myself? Do I build it myself? Who do I partner with? But the questions that most of the companies are not asking is some of the implications. what constitutes as even responsible AI? You ask different individuals or different sectors or companies, they're going to have very, very different answers. But at the same time, the urgency is there in terms of adoption. So that's why we started this AI Governance Alliance last June. Today, we have over 280 organizations, and that translates into more than 330 experts internationally doing this work with us. And what do they do? So the fundamental mission is really to anticipate the evolution of the technology and making sure that different sectors and companies, organizations adopt it in the most inclusive, equitable, and also responsible way. So the work has three main tracks. The first one is safe systems and technologies track. That's basically the technology track. Looking at the latest features of the technology, right now they're focusing on agents and interactions and multimodal models. So think about if you think tackling digital safety is already complicated enough, but in the future when you have AI agents coupled with metaverse or XR type of avatars, what are the rights of those avatars and agents, and when it comes to digital safety implications and also IP as well, what does it even mean? Are we going to wait until some court cases being resolved, or do we need to take a more proactive kind of a stance there? So that's what the technology track does, and we already published the first shift left safety methodology to make sure that throughout the entire AI value chain, at each level, from the developers to the users, all need to take on certain responsibilities and liabilities as well. Then the second track is around AI transformation of industries and sectors. There we'll look at how different organizations are using it in the most responsible way, and then particularly when it comes to AI and energy, because energy demand is already skyrocketing. So how are we going to manage that as a society? That also has far-reaching implications. And the last track focus on governance. Again, because of the speed of the technology and how a lot of the times public sectors are falling behind when it comes to having this kind of thorough and comprehensive understanding of the evolution of the technology, we think it's important to bring the relevant governments, policymakers together to really. We don't expect that there will be a global unified approach when it comes to governance, but at least it needs to be more coordinated. So that's basically, how we do it. And then if you look at some of the fundamentals, first of all, about data, now we're all racing to use more data to train more powerful model. And those models can also be used to tackle some of the issues related to digital safety. But in most of the jurisdictions, child sexual abuse materials data cannot be used to train the model. So there are many trade-offs and there are many different sandboxes that need to be implemented, and the AI Governance Alliance look at all of those.
Yeah, and I think there's something about when you say about the rush to get all the data. There was even, and I won't name the company because that's not why we're here, but it wanted to buy an entire national publishing house to have enough data to train in model because it was behind in collecting all the data. And it's insane. Like, tech company was going to buy a national publishing house of a country to be able to train its models. And to me, that's just amazing. But there is also the thing that, when you speak about AI, and we've been talking a lot about generative AI, and what you have seen in our ecosystem, and you've heard about this, is that, as you mentioned, Kathy, now the child sexual abuse material that is produced by AI is now indistinguishable from actual child sexual abuse material. And why this matters? Because law enforcement will spend endless resources to save a child that does not exist possibly. So we'll have, and already they can't cope with the volume of this. So how many, there's 35 million reports annually made to just one national clearinghouse. There's endless amount of these reports that come to law enforcement. They will at some point not know. For now, how they know, and maybe this is already like old news, is that it looks too good. When it looks too good, they're like, oh, this may be AI. That's the only reason why now they sometimes know the difference. The second thing why it matters, people tell us all the time, if it's not a real child, why do you care? because we know that people who consume child sexual abuse material in 40 to 50% of cases go to commit physical abuse. And that's why we need to remove it, whether it's real child or not. It does normalize child sexual abuse. It does normalize all of those things. So I think when we think about AI and generative AI, Thorne has published recently with a number of companies guidance on how we can work on this, but red teaming and anticipating, as you say, anticipating harms is going to be critical for us to be able to really understand in which ways it can be abused. For example, you can ask how to groom a child, and ChatGPT will tell you. You will not use a groom, but you'll say, how can I, become friends with a 13-year-old? It will tell you everything from what singers to mention, what to do, it will tell you everything. So these type of things, we need to understand what the implications of technologies and really use advanced thinking to course correct as we do that. But AI is not the only thing that people are concerned about. There is the whole issue of decentralized technologies, cryptocurrencies, NFTs, and all sorts of things that mostly associated with negative things, but obviously there are some really good use cases for these technologies. And again, Giga has been doing a lot of that stuff through connectivity credits. Think about how can you use blockchains and decentralized technologies for delivering connectivity. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that as well, Chris?
I mean, a lot of our work comes back to this thing that you've just mentioned, which is about identity and trueness and existence in the world. And so another quick question. I can kind of see everybody in the back. Okay, now if I do this, we can see you. Who has, if you think about the school that you went to or the school that your kids went to or go to, does it have a website? Your school or your kids' school, does it have a website? Raise your hand. Hold them up for a minute. It's an exercise here. Your school or the school that your kids go to, is there a website for it? No? Some? Okay, some no. Okay, so keep your hand, keep them up. Proud. Okay. Now I want just look around, look back, look over. Okay, there's a lot of hands up, right? Now, everybody other than in the first 2 rows, put your hands down. You guys keep your hands up. First 2 rows, keep your hands up. Put your hands down. Yeah, okay, that's fine, those 4. That's about how many schools in the world have websites. There's all the schools in the world, right? So just think about that difference. And why did I do this exercise? So why does it matter if your school has a website or has a web presence? Why does it matter if you as a young person have an ID? We just heard about why digital IDs are important. Most schools in the world do not exist in the digital surface. And that might not seem that important if a poor school in the middle of nowhere doesn't exist online. But it actually means a lot. It means a lot to have an identity. First of all, it means that people are proud of having gone to you. They think about you, or they didn't like you. I don't know if you're not a great school. But it means that you were there. You're instantiated. You're a place. You can be found on a map. It means that when the government needs to deliver a book, it knows where you are. It has your latitude and longitude in some database. And as we work with Giga, we find when we're mapping schools that most schools do not exist for sure on the public internet, and many of them don't even exist in the private databases of governments where they're supposed to. And that, again, might not seem like a big issue, but it really is. If we're talking about a world where truth and veracity is going to be more and more important, we need to know and be able to protect the data about the poorest people. And so one of the things Giga is doing that I'm very excited about is our work on making sure that every school in the world not only has that dot in the map which shows where it is and shows who it is and what it is, but also that it comes with its own online presence. And for us, that means an on-chain presence. If you're not working with blockchain very much, that also might sound like alien language. But what it means is that there is a permanent mark for that school that's publicly visible to everyone else. It exists. And when you exist, you have power. And it just isn't true for 90% of the schools in the world. So when we think about how do we use blockchain for good to combat these bad things that are coming, it's in cases like giving identity to institutions or spaces that otherwise didn't exist. And I'll just end one thing that's why it's important. One of our donors, early donors, was a man named Elon Musk. He's got a bunch of rockets, and he has some satellites. You may have heard of him. And he's become a little weird in the last few years. When Elon put money into Giga, it was a very nice gesture, and it helped us to build our mapping system. Now Starlink is one of the companies that uses this data that we've created and uses it to plan its satellite deployments, as do other mobile network operators and tech companies. But they use it a lot more than they should. They use it in ways that we don't think is totally fair. It's like the big companies sucking the data out of national libraries and using it for proprietary stuff. It doesn't seem fair or balanced. And the only way you can fight that is not with regulation and complaining and yelling at people because they just don't care. It's you can fight it with technology. And if you build systems that are also impermeable to the same kind of crawlers, the same kind of bots, if you use things like mathematical proofs to protect your data, you start to have some power in a world that otherwise seems very, very scary. But we can't do that by using the tools only of public policy. We have to use technology, and that means we have to know technology, and that's why our team is very proud to have our tech center in Barcelona and have so many people who really come from the worlds of engineering and some of the future tech that you were just talking about. And I guess, Kathy, on that point, as we try to make these things explicable and explainable, we need frameworks and guidance. And I wonder if you can maybe tell us a little bit about the work that you've been doing at WEF with coming up with those systems to give the bounding and give the descriptions of some of these emerging areas.
When we first started the Global Coalition for Digital Safety, we did a landscape analysis because we know there's a lot of great work that's been done by many of the IOs and civil societies that's out there. So we kept going back to what is the one thing that differentiates what the forum can do from other organizations. Again, going back to what I shared earlier, it is about bringing it to the decision makers' agenda. My first role at the forum was managing the media entertainment industry, which includes many of the powerful tech companies there. So you have either the CEOs or some of the famous chief strategy officers or revenue officers there. And the topics are usually around sustainability, monetization, but there's no chatter about digital safety whatsoever. So that's when we started to realize that we had this convening power. We could bring the relevant community together at the highest level to make sure that they really act on it, and we need to hold them accountable as well. So at the beginning of the Digital Safety Coalition, we first started off by setting up really this global principles on digital safety to make sure that we translate the human rights offline into the online setting, and particularly protecting the vulnerable and marginalized groups, and particularly with children, to make sure that their privacy and safety are balanced online. And currently, it's a few years later, the community is very strong, and the current focus is very much on how do we actually measure digital safety, because we know that's a very difficult issue. Many of the elements are technical, but a lot more are political. It's about not being able to share data in a timely manner. So that's when this work, I think, took over probably more than a year's time, and we published the report with a strong set of metrics and measurements, because we believe only by having strong metrics and measurements, it lays the foundation for a safer digital ecosystem. It promotes accountability, transparency, supports evidence-based decision-making, and also at the same time, we'll be able to measure some of the interventions, are they actually effective or not. So those are some of the specific things we look at, and we decided, you know what, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it's really encouraging to see the safety community, even with all of the hype cycles coming, coming and go. But you have this core community really look at the issue, but we need to do it in a way that best supports the whole community.
Thank you for that, Kathy. Thank you for that work, because it's really, really important, as I say, for transparency and accountability reasons, but also for us to be able to just understand what's happening and have a framework to think about those things, because currently it's really hard. Sometimes there are debates, and Daniel and I were talking about this earlier, these debates of whether the internet is good or bad. And I'm like, people, when they fight, and there's like the camp that says it's terrible, and there's a camp that says it's only amazing, and they all use just literally apples and oranges. And it's impossible to even understand the differentiated experiences just because we haven't been collecting data. We have no idea of how to measure those things. So this is really good progress in that sense. There were a couple of people who wanted to also share a couple of things with you here. And I think before I give some time to Ken, who wants to come in on the AI side, you did commit to that, Ken? Okay, good, you remember now. There was recently at one of the meetings of the Global Digital Safety Coalition, I think it was, we were talking, I think it was Nick Thompson, from the CEO of the Atlantic, who was saying that if it was to him to now tackle one thing when it comes to Gen AI, it would be to really ban Gen AI clients to be able to impersonate humans. And you don't need to know much, besides think about a few movies that you watched about similar topic to know that things never end well. But yet, these AI companions have become literally that. somebody who gives you comfort, who is flirty with you, who is sweet, who gives you, support that you need, and we don't know where that leads. We literally have no way of understanding what the impact on humans will be down the line. Yes, it can help you feel less lonely, but are you less lonely? I don't know. How do you think about those things? Anyways, Ken, there's a lot of work being now done around psychosocial support or mental health and AI companions. Your thoughts, just how do you think? Are you scared?
Now? Now we can, yes. Yes, whoops, sorry. No, I just wanted to say a couple of words about it. Am I scared? I would say I'm a little bit worried. And I think this links a little bit to what we were talking about on the earlier panel, about trying to build structures now that will help us understand the questions of the future. So I'm sort of feeling like if we went back 10, 15 years, what could we have put in place to understand now what the impact of social media and aspects like that are on people's mental health? And when I think about AI, and I'm obviously not an AI expert, but I spend quite a lot of time trying to play around with different chatbots, and particularly mental health focused chatbots and psychology-based chatbots and things. I think there's a huge, huge potential for them to be very beneficial. So, there's some quite good now chatbots out there that are seem to be quite good, but we need to understand firstly what are the harms, what are the risks, what are the benefits, are they effective, and things like that. And I think there's a huge need to do that research now, because it's so easy to just jump on the internet and start chatting to ChatGPT about your mental health. Or like Maria was saying about grooming, you can get answers like that from chatbots. So I think there's a huge bit like that around work with chatbots. And then when it comes to the companions, reading about things like being able to have chatbots that imitate people who've passed on, these might have huge implications for children, for adults, for humans, in terms of our relationships, in terms of our own mental health and well-being. And we don't know what the answers are yet, but we can probably guess at some of them. But I think we really need to build in those structures for the research really, really early on. And I think that would be one of the main things that I'll really advocate for seeing. Yeah.
Thanks, Ken. Chris or Kathy, any comments on that?
I mean, so maybe 15 years ago, UNICEF pioneered something called the equity approach to development, where it broke the world into quintiles financially. And it said, of the 5 quintiles, if you invest $1 in the poorest part of the world in health outcomes, building health centers and doctors and so on, because it's so hard to get that dollar there and get it moving, it's actually worth about 1.6 times as if you'd put that dollar in any of the other quintiles. That's called the equity approach. And my big worry about AI is that it is fundamentally an inequity approach to things, because it seems to do a good job. It mimics some of the things we would think about in the wealthy world of having a therapist who you pay a lot of money to do, it kind of does an okay job at that. And because of that, it will allow people to abrogate their responsibility, to not be responsible anymore for taking care of the bottom quintiles. Because they'll say, here's a solution that does an okay job at diagnosing things, but it also tells you to make pizza out of glue. So okay, so we're going to say, well, but we've got a thing that kind of educates the kids. Would a rich person ever use it to educate their kid? No. But it kind of makes you feel better about the poor people because they have this little thing that can do something for them. And that's a really dangerous world. And that's a world where technology divides us more and more and more. And it becomes harder to see that because you live in your own little bubble of the MRI with the AI on it, which that's really nice. That's for rich people, right? And that will help you. But then the poor person goes on and says, I'm kind of hungry. What do I do? Eat pizza with glue. Come on, that's your nutritional count for the day. And that gulf is going to get bigger. So my real worry is that these products aren't designed equitably, that the wealthier you are, if you pay for ChatGPT, it's a much better version than the free one. And that gulf is just going to grow bigger and bigger in the next 18 months.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ken. I also wanted to just offer some thoughts as well, because you're absolutely right. We've seen, because the forum, we have a global innovators program that look at all of the, from pre-Series A startup to all the way to unicorns. I can't tell you how many startups I've come across during the last year that offer some sort of mental health and wellness chatbots, because that's a gray area. There's no, I don't believe in any in any jurisdictions, there's clear guidelines in terms of the actually adoptability of those type of chatbots. So what that means is really, before the regulation, which may or may never come through, you do need to have risk awareness among the public, but at the same time to make sure really those companies who are working on it to have some sort of baseline they can look at, because otherwise they're just going to go very, very fast. And then just one point to Chris' comment. On education, absolutely. Right now, the technology that's very much about it's not designed. There will never be that step change to give you the absolute truth. So we need to accept that. But at the same time, we do need to look at what are some of the potential low-hanging fruit. We talk about sharing data is extremely difficult, particularly across border. But if you think about education data, around the world, they're actually not that different. So one of the things we're thinking about at the forum is, can we, we've been working on cross-border data free flow for many, many years, but because of whatever the political reason, it will never be able to get to the stage that truly will be implementable. But what about when it comes to education data? Can we imagine some sort of consortium where education data can be shared and used to train, some of the AI models that could actually be deployed in a responsible way compared to many of the education models that's just being developed by private sector. So there are some of the innovative solutions that's being thought about right now, but the issues that you mentioned are absolutely real.
Yeah, and I guess like what comes to my mind is that everything that all of you have mentioned, a lot of these technologies and these prototypes and these tools are built for adults. So like when you think about the generative AI clients and platforms, they really weren't thinking about kids using them, but kids end up using them very fast, and they're going to be the early adopters of this, and they're going to be the ones who are going to have the biggest impact, good and bad. And again, we don't know enough, or we don't have the frameworks to even start thinking about or researching how will this impact them. And that's my biggest worry, because as we're developing the tools for mental health or other types of things, we don't even know how kids are going to be impacted by this. But I did want to, Carla, if you're there from ITU, you all have done some thinking about AI more broadly, and share a little bit about that. Maybe one minute, 1.5, 2?
50 seconds.
Perfect.
Teaser. Very quickly, 2-3 points, because I don't want to repeat what it has been said. But as you know, we have been organizing the AI for Good Summit since 2017. And it is quite impressive how, over these years, actually, the first 2 editions, I think there was nothing related to online safety for children, or nothing related to, how AI is impacting negatively, girls, right? And the use that girls can have with technology. While, in the recent, I would say, forums, we have more and more emphasis on online safety. And I think that, going a little bit back on what you are saying, is the fact that not only we don't know, it's also because we don't really include children in the development of that technology. And we still see them as passive, right, users and passive actors rather than, the actual developers of tomorrow. So of course this is bringing all the biases, right, that it involves in that development. And that goes a little bit with what my boss said earlier about digital literacy, right? So the important is in providing digital literacy related to AI, since the beginning, since at the early stage of the life of the child. I think that what we heard today is a little bit just the beginning, right? And I think that what we need. We would need, or at least what we try to open our member states, being a UN agency, is the fact that AI systems not only needs to be be safe by design, as I think Najat mentioned at the beginning. They need to be resilient, to cyber attacks, but they also need to being addressed with robust policies, right? And this is what we have addressed also yesterday in our panel. We need to have AI policies and regulations which embed, children's rights. And this is something, again, that is still lacking. I know that is hard sometimes from a country perspective. But again, if we want to be at the forefront of the issue, we really need to, to have that approach. And that, because Maria is already looking at me, I thank you very much.
It's the light, for me, it's the light. It's really, really hard to look at it. Thank you so much, Carla, for that. I guess we need to close. I'm looking at Nobu, but I do want to have more conversation. I really was hoping there's going to be more time for actual engagement, more with audience. Should we take a round of questions? Yes. Let's try. Questions.
We can't see any of you, by the
way.
So.
We have Lucia and then colleague from IOM.
Hi, this is Lucia again. I'm wondering about efforts being taken to train models to know that they are interacting with children. I think, at least from my field of work, it's a huge challenge that they know that there's a child, that the AI know that there's a child on the other side of the device. Thank you.
I'm going to be very cynical about this. The AI knows, but they don't want to admit it because it's legal liability and kids are not allowed on platforms. So kind of like, I think a lot of these models and a lot of these platforms already have enough data to know who is a child, who is not a child. In many ways, it depends on how do you use that data and what's allowed. But anyways, I think it's a good point, and I think there's something we need to talk about more, especially in terms of age gating, in terms of how do we actually do age assurance, and how do we actually know when a client is a child, and then what age-appropriate experience for that child looks like on a platform. Not expel the child immediately, but if it's a platform the child can use, what is age appropriate for that child, and how does the child get that experience? As we chatted before, what happens on different platforms, but the AI recommends a 13-year-old how to have a sexual intercourse with a 26-year-old. Says use candles, candles are nice. Yeah, stuff like that. So like that's really bad, but that's only from my end. Kathy, Chris?
The AI definitely knows.
It definitely knows.
That's why regulation doesn't work.
That doesn't work. It does somehow. Question.
So one question that's been on my mind as we've had this discussion this afternoon is as we think about improving connectivity and alongside that safety for children, how do we ensure that we're including children on the move? So thinking in particular about the most vulnerable that don't have these support structures around them, oftentimes unaccompanied minors. I think as we look at the impacts of climate change, extreme weather, resource scarcity, and we see increases in trafficking and child labor, we need to be thinking about how to ensure that these children, the children unfortunately that don't show up on the Google Maps because they're not in traditional schoolhouse structures, how do we ensure that they're not left behind?
The sad truth is that 10 years, most children are going to be children on the move because of climate change and where its effects are going to be most dire. If you're right now there are about 80 million kids who are on the move because of war or violence, 60 million, something like that. If you're a child who's a refugee child in Europe, you go through 6 pieces of paper identity. Usually on your refugee trip, you land, you get one paper, you get another. You have a single number that stays with you the whole time. If you're a kid who's coming from Northern Africa on a boat, and there's one number that you keep with you. Anybody know what that number is? What's the number? Kind of. It's actually your WhatsApp number. And it's your WhatsApp number because unlike your phone number, you change SIM cards in every country. You go to a refugee station, they give you a new SIM card, but your WhatsApp number keeps you connected to your family, to your friends. That's your network. That's your only source of safety. When we talk about digital identity of schools, it's not just about schools. It's that schools are the thing we can do first. But of course, after schools, you get to be students, you get families, you get all of that. If you don't have that identity, if it's not permanent, if it doesn't exist at a level above the state, you really run a risk of in a very chaotic future that's coming, not being able to protect the weakest people in the world. And I think that's why it's so important that this technology is built. It's built in places that are where the need is greatest. It is built in a way that is decentralized. And it's what Giga is trying to build from the very beginning of our work.
That's an excellent question, because we as Safe Online are really trying to penetrate more humanitarian community. I was recently in a big cybersecurity forum in Luxembourg where they were talking about online harms, cybersecurity threats. They only spoke about infrastructure. He was like, data blackouts, what do we do about those? And I was like, but beneficiaries, like kids. And it's usually seen, connectivity again, somehow is always seen as a silver bullet for everything. So give them devices, connect them, they're gonna be able to do A, B, and C. We have seen from Ukraine experience, children on the move, child sexual exploitation and abuse was skyrocketing because kids were connecting to the abusers who were offering to host them. Mothers, kids, it was incredible. We are now currently investing a lot more money into the research on humanitarian context and online threats because there isn't much research about it. And again, while connectivity in those moments is a lifeline, in many ways, what do you do with geolocation services? Oh, is bomb gonna hit you? We don't know. All these kinds of things can be a good thing because you can trace a family and connect to a child, or it can be a bad thing because a kidnapper can find you. And these things, I think Chris always says, it was one of his colleagues who was saying that in a crisis, the planes that reach the kids first are not the planes that deliver support, but planes of human traffickers are the ones who land first in any place of crisis. And with connectivity and being able to connect the kids, we don't even know how dangerous that can be. So that's just, we're working on it much more. We're trying to really connect. Kati, anything from here? No. Any other questions? There is one more.
Thank you so much. I'm Caroline from UNICEF. And I think what you talked a lot about, that overwhelming reality of AI and the danger and impact of AI can have, and how hard it is to influence these bigger companies and large language models and so on. I think one thing that we should be able to control, as most of us are nonprofit international organizations, UN agencies, NGOs, and so on, is what we do with the use of AI, and at least that this doesn't create more harm and impact, and that's not the reality right now. And I think we haven't been able to define what, especially humanitarian principles, which should be our roadmap around do no harm and so on, look like in the context of AI. And I was wondering, what were your thoughts around this to advance that agenda, so that at least we have a way to know what our rules are and our red lines are as a community. Thank you.
About 10 years ago, we pioneered something called the Principles of Digital Development. These are 9 things that we learned in our team at UNICEF when we were starting the innovation office there about how to build technology that is safe and inclusive and so on. Those have been instantiated. You can look them up, Principles of Digital Development. Much of that applies to AI. AI is just math, right? It's not, so it's just a little bit more mathy than some of the older software. But one thing that's so clearly true as a principle is that this stuff, for it to be good for the world, it must be open source, and it must be built and used in the places that are the same. It can't be built somewhere and used somewhere else. That is not good AI if it's housed outside, and if it's proprietary and closed and you can't access it, it is also net bad for the world. So those are 2 things that I'm convinced about. They're in the Principles of Digital Development. In the old days, they can come out more strongly. But a lot of that work fundamentally about how you deploy new technology is still very, very valid. And I'd encourage people to use that framework as a starting point for looking at AI, but really focus on how you can help create open source local instances of AI that are trained on local data, that are built by local engineers in the countries that we're working in.
I mean, just to add to that from UN perspective, I think where the rubber hits the road is then, do UN agencies and people working in the field have capacity to implement those principles? And we sometimes end up, I have countless examples of country offices, not only of UNICEF, I used to work for UNICEF, but other agencies end up in bad contracts with bad providers of bad solutions, where data gets lost or leaks, or because we don't have enough frameworks under which we work. So I think investing in those capacities, I was speaking to ICRC, and they have a chief data officer for the organization. They have a huge data center. They invest a lot of effort into data protection. Many other organizations don't have that. So seeing how we can build that internal muscle in the organizations will be critical for us to be able to ourselves at least not do harm as we implement and use new technologies. But again, principles are a good start. I think the investment needs to go much deeper organizationally to understand how these organizations, but again, we are not the only ones. Other corporations are struggling with that as well.
And I'll also offer support from the forum community as well. So you talk about, maybe it's quite difficult for the private sector to adopt it. We know that, but that's what we really focus on, dedicate our effort to it. And we know there are different levers that can be pulled. And you can imagine each of those like safety framework we put out, it's not just a paper someone wrote it within like a week. It's a whole community after runs of reviews. And you can imagine there's armies of lawyers and PR people all look at it. But eventually there are things, red lines we definitely do not compromise on. And the organizations must adhere to the principles we put in place. So when it comes to some of the things, I'm losing my train of thoughts. I'm definitely jet lagged. It's just came back from Asia. But when it comes to some of the frameworks we put together, for example, the safety one I talk about, that really assigns responsibility and liability across the entire value chain. Because otherwise, if you ask startups, they will say, we only develop models. It's a general purpose technology. We should not be liable for any of it. It's only the applications, developers and users, they should be liable. But we say, no, the whole methodology needs to be, they need to use this shift left methodology, which is quite common in software development. And at every stage of the development, there needs to be certain care that's put into that process. And when it comes to different type of models as well, I know Chris is a big proponent of open source, but open source also brings certain challenges. So what constitutes as a responsible release strategy from the fully closed model to the fully opened? There needs to be differences. So all of those we develop as a community, and all of the members need to obey the kind of guidelines that's being put together.
I cannot allow this event to finish on this grim panels and notes, so I'm going to challenge both of you to say something positive to the audience, or anything that brings you some spark of hope that will not end up being dominated by AI or something.
Well, for me, that's all of you, and I say that really wholeheartedly because from what the position I'm in, the kind of actors I deal with, you do see people chasing the investment, chasing where the technology is going, what is the latest thing new is saying. But at the same time, let's not to forget, there's this set of governance principles, let it be privacy, safety, security, interoperability, digital identity is a big part of it. Those are things that, without people actually look at them and dedicate their lifetime to it, the society won't hold. So to me, that's really the biggest encouraging sign and hope for me.
Thank you, Kathy. Chris?
I think it's never good to live in a time where everything's happening all at once, but the happy part, there is so much positive stuff changing in the world of technology. And while we talked about a lot of dark things today, it is true, I believe, that the only thing that can stand against that darkness is the type of quick, speedy, fair, open development of technology that can help humanity work at scale together. And we see that possible. We see it in Giga as we're connecting schools. You see young people from around the world who are able to have access to tools that they need to develop solutions not only for themselves, but for old people like us as well. And that's really exciting. I mean, I think we're living in a world where technology is very scary, it's moving very quickly, but it also offers all of us as opportunities. And I think ringing a bell to make us move faster, to ensure that we're also using it to protect the world that we care about, and that's so delicate all around us.
Thank you both so much. And thank you, everybody, for listening to this panel. On my end, I will say that I am so, so grateful that we were able to convene today connectivity and safety community and people thinking about the future threats, because again, it's so rare to bring people like this together. We don't even speak the same language, as I said before, but I'm seeing some convergence around things that we all feel can help us move the needle, and one of those is partnerships and technology leveraging for the good. So thank you again.
Thanks, Maria.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you very much to the panelists. This is great. It was great to have it on a positive note, and thank you for you to being here. I think, I hope you will take home what you have, listened to today, and start reflecting more in your jobs. How can I do this, more? How can I contribute? But also, I will ask Maria and Chris to take it home. What Safe Online is going to do with Giga, and what Giga is going to do with Safe Online? What are the next steps? But our next step is to go to the reception, which is upstairs. There's a beautiful, stunning view over Geneva and the lake. So please join us, and thank you very much again. And please be in touch. Don't reinvent the wheel. If you need anything about this, I think our details will be shown on the screen. We have a lot of resources, a lot of things we can do. We can connect. We can, with organizations and resources. And go, Maria. Go.
I don't care whether this is now like live stream or not. I want to thank you and our team. So Serena, huge thanks for doing almost all the work with Caroline on our end, but also Nobu, AI, Corinne, Vivian, Fami, and others from the Giga team who did such an amazing job with all of this. So without all of you, this would not be a success at all, and I really believe it was. So I want to really thank you personally for doing everything to make this a success.
Thank you. We'll see you upstairs on the rooftop.